Chapter 1128. Elder Wanzheng seemed to be used to this. He laughed and threw out 2 prescriptions. Good. This is the prescription for another type of pill. Take a look. The woman took it with both hands and glanced at it. Her expression changed quickly. She was standing at the back just now, so she didn't know that the words on the paper would appear alternately. When she saw how relaxed Chu Luiyue was, she thought. Just as she was panicking, the words on the paper disappeared. Soon new names of herbs appeared. The woman realized that she had underestimated the situation. Cold sweat started to appear on her forehead. Wu Xian is already a 9th grade celestial physician. She should be able to pass the test more easily than Chu Yu, right? She's only 21 this year. Her talent isn't much worse than Chu Yu's. Maybe Chu Yu won't be able to reach Wu Xian's level when he's 21. That's not necessarily true. If Elder Wanzheng's test is so easy to pass, why hasn't anyone succeeded in the past 3 years? There's no lack of 9th grade celestial physician in there. In that case, how did Chu Yu pass? Isn't he a little too smart? Whispers could be heard from the people behind him. Wu Xian became more and more nervous. She was very confident in herself, and believed that she was the most outstanding one among these people. Therefore, when he saw everyone praising that Chu Yu endlessly, a bit of a competitive heart was born, and he wanted to win against him. But she didn't expect the test to be so difficult. The more she read, the more anxious and confused Wu Xian became. How did Chu Yu remember so many herbs at once? He even found the problem with them. Soon, the last line of words disappeared. Wu Xian hurriedly looked at the second sheet. However, her mind was in a mess. Even if she had 10% of her strength, she could only use 70 to 80%. The words on the second piece of paper overlapped and soon disappeared. Are you done reading? Elder Wanzheng looked at the 2 sheets of white paper in her hand and asked. I'm done reading. Wu Xian's voice was weak, and her hands were trembling. Then tell me, which one is real and which one is fake? Wu Xian was silent for a long time. It was only when Elder Wanzheng urged him that he gritted his teeth and gave an answer. The first one is real, the second one is. No, the second one is real. Elder Wanzheng didn't say anything and just stared at her. After a long while, Wu Xian finally gave in. She lowered her head, her cheeks flushed red. She opened her mouth and finally said, "Don't worry. This student does not know." There was a hint of unwillingness and shame in her words. It was her first time admitting her incompetence in front of so many people. However, Elder Wanzheng had seen too many of these situations. He raised his hand and shot out a beam of origin power. The 2 pieces of paper silently turned to dust. You still have a second chance. Wu Xian was shocked. Only then did she remember that Elder Bo Yan had mentioned before that everyone only had 2 chances to be apprenticed. If the first time didn't work, there was always a second time. However, if he failed twice, he would be chased out and unable to officially become a student of the academy. She bit her lip and suddenly looked at Chu Luiyue. Elder Wanzheng, this student has something to ask. Was the prescription that Chu Yu looked at the same level as mine? If it wasn't lower level and simpler than hers, how could it be so easy? Chu Yu's prescription used a total of 198 types of herbs. Yours is 181. Elder Wanzheng glanced at her and smiled. Any other questions? Wu Xian's face turned red and white. No more. With that, she bit her lip and retreated to the side. There seemed to be tears in her eyes. She looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. This young man, is he really so much stronger than me? However, Chu Luiyue didn't take her seriously, because at this moment, that familiar gaze was still on her. She resisted the urge to look up. Next, the celestial physician's side was relatively quiet, but the Xian master and martial artist side was much more lively. Some succeeded, some failed. Some were happy, some were disappointed. However, this kind of situation happened every month, so the older students were already used to it. Chu Luiyue glanced out of the corner of his eye, and happened to see that Lin Qifei seemed to have passed the assessment. His talent was stronger than what he had displayed, so it was naturally not a problem for him to get into Lingxiao College. After that, Luo Yanming also successfully passed. Chu Luiyue glanced at them, and thought that Luo Shishir and Zhuosheng shouldn't have any problems. The new student assessment progressed very quickly. The celestial physician's side was the first to finish, including Chu Luyue. A total of 4 of the 6 people passed the test. As for the remaining 2, they failed regretfully. The elimination rate for the Xian master's side was almost a quarter. Looking at the dejected young faces, Chu Luyue's brows twitched slightly. Lingxiao College's threshold was indeed extremely high. However, this atmosphere of joy and sadness quickly dissipated. This was because, after the first part of the new student assessment ended, even more people were eagerly waiting for the Azure Cloud roll. Countless eyes looked at the Donghuang Bell Tower. Elder Bo Yin laughed out loud. Looks like you've all waited anxiously. Fine, I'll release the roll now. As he spoke, he waved his sleeve. The Donghuang bell rang 3 times in a row. Dong, dong, dong. In the next moment, thousands of rays of light flew out, shining brilliantly. Countless rays of light converged on the iron-black wall, forming neatly arranged names. Chu Luyue looked up. She was looking at the celestial physician roll. A familiar name suddenly appeared. Digression. I'm going out for a whole day today, so I'm very tired. Chapter 1129. Rongxiao. Chu Luyue was stunned when she saw the familiar name at the top of the list. Rongxiao is actually on the celestial physician list. And he's so close to the top. How could he be number 1? Chu Luyue muttered softly. Elder Wanzheng looked up and narrowed his eyes when he heard her voice. You mean Rongxiao? He's not number 1. Chu Luyue turned to look at him. Rongxiao is number 2. There's another person above him. Another person. Chu Luyue looked up again, but she didn't see another name above Rongxiao. Number 1. Number 1's name has been erased. Elder Wanzheng's tone was a little strange. Why is that? Chu Luyue couldn't figure it out. Since everyone wanted to be on the list, why would the number 1's name be erased? That's the dean's doing. After the number 1's name was placed on the list, it disappeared not long after. Many new students thought that Rongxiao was number 1, but that wasn't the case. Elder Wanzheng lifted his chin. Look carefully. The number 1 position is engraved with the dean's seal. Chu Luyue took a closer look. Indeed, there seemed to be a faint layer of pressure at the top. But why would the dean do that? Chu Luyue wanted to say something but stopped. A top figure like him should have his own considerations. She guessed that it would be a waste of time to ask Elder Wanzheng. But this is something that happened a few years ago. Not many people in the academy talk about it now, so not many people know about it. Even if they knew that something was wrong with the list, the elders and students tacitly chose to keep quiet. Elder Wanzheng suddenly sighed softly. If he hadn't accepted Chu Luyue as his disciple, he wouldn't have mentioned this matter. After all, some things were in the past. It's fine as long as you know about it. There's no need to dwell on it. Now, it's not wrong to say that Rongxiao is the celestial physician on the Azure Cloud leaderboard. Chu Yu, you have to cultivate more in the future and strive to be on the list as soon as possible. Elder smiled and patted Chu Luyue's shoulder. His usually solemn square face was surprisingly kind at this moment. He looked at Chu Luyue with sparkling eyes, as if he had high expectations of her. A faint sense of uneasiness grew in her heart. Master, what do you mean? Elder Wanzheng chuckled. Don't worry. I won't ask you to be on the list now. I'll give you 3 months. The rankings looked at the last name. There was the last name first. There were only 100 names on the proclamation of Azure Clouds, and the last name seemed to be a man's name, Bian Wenhao. That Bian Wenhao, how strong is he now? Chu Luyue asked in a low voice. He not strong. That kid is now at the peak of the 9th rank. As long as you reach the peak of the 9th rank, with your spiritual energy as a celestial physician, you'll definitely surpass him. Chu Luyue was speechless. Elder Wanzheng, you seem to have misunderstood me. No matter how talented I am, isn't it a little too much for you to expect me to break through from the 8th rank to the 9th rank in 3 months? Besides, I just broke through to the 8th rank at the Heavenly Cave Cliff. Is there a problem? Elder Wanzheng looked at her lovingly. Do you want me to cheer you on? Chu Luyue replied. I'll definitely do my best. That's my good disciple. Only then did Elder Wanzheng heave a sigh of relief. It was quite difficult to find another genius like that scourge. Otherwise, he wouldn't have failed to find one in the past few years. Now he finally had Chuyu. With more effort, he should also be a promising talent. Elder Wanzheng was comfortable, but Chu Luiyue was uncomfortable. She glanced at the Qingyun ranking again. The last 100th place was at the peak of the 9th rank. Then what about Rong Xiao? She no longer had any interest in finding that man and asking him about it. The gap was too big. What else was there to ask? Looking at the unfamiliar names on the ranking, Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. She still had a lot to learn in Lingxiao College. Other than the Celestial Physician ranking, the other 3 rankings had also been hung up. The mystic masters and martial artists had gathered the most people, but the blacksmiths were still quiet. Other than an elder standing there symbolically, there wasn't even anyone looking at the ranking. The older students were used to it, but the new students were busy with themselves, so it was very empty for a while. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to take a look at the 2 rankings, but unfortunately, it was too crowded and lively. She thought for a moment and walked over to the blacksmiths. Unlike the Celestial Physician ranking, there was only a short section on the blacksmiths ranking. This meant that there were less than 100 people on it. Chu Luiyue looked at the name at the top, and her pupils constricted. It was actually Rong Xiao too. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. She paused and walked back a few steps. From where she was standing, she could see the 2 rankings. It was obvious that Rong Xiao's name on the Celestial Physician ranking was obviously 1 level lower than his name on the blacksmith's ranking. Rong Xiao was the true number 1 on the blacksmith's ranking. Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but look at Rong Xiao, who was standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower. This man, he actually hid so much. It didn't take a genius to figure out exactly how formidable his strength was, since he was able to obtain such a ranking on the Ascension rankings. Rong Xiao looked down. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and walked toward the ranking. The crowd was noisy. So this is the Qingyun ranking. Sigh, I finally made it last month, but I didn't make any breakthroughs this month. I'm afraid I'll be squeezed down again. I heard that those who have completely broken through to the divine level can only make it into the top 20. I really don't know what kind of monsters are those who are ranked in front. I heard that Senior Rong Xiao has been on the ranking for many years, and no one has broken through to this day. He's really amazing. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. As expected, Rong Xiao's name was still in the first place. However, there was a small blank space under his name. Thinking of what Elder Wanzheng said just now, she suddenly understood something. Some of the new students were still asking questions. The first place is Senior Rong Xiao. Then what's the matter with the second place? That's right. Why is there a blank space out of nowhere? Shoo. Hearing this, the senior students hurriedly signaled for them to be quiet. The person who occupies the second place is a special student in the academy. His name is not to be mentioned. It's fine if you don't understand since you're new here. But don't talk about this in the future. Many of the new students were confused. Why is that? There's no reason. In short, from now on, you will abide by this rule. You came to the academy to improve your own cultivation. Other people's matters have nothing to do with you. Understand? Thank you for your teachings, senior brother. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she went to look at the Xian Master ranking. Rong Xiao's name was in second place. His name had been erased, just like the Celestial Physician ranking. Chapter 1130. A strange feeling arose in Chu Luiyue's heart. There were a total of 4 rankings on the Azure Cloud roll. Rong Xiao occupied the first place on the Weapon Refiner and Martial Artist rankings. That mysterious student occupied the first place on the other 2 rankings, Celestial Physician and Mystic Master. To be able to stand up to Rong Xiao, one didn't need to think to know that the person must be very formidable. But such a powerful student should be doted on by the dean and elders. Why would they deliberately erase that person's name? From the way Elder Bo Yen and the others treated Rong Xiao, it could be seen that they should be especially tolerant and gentle towards students with outstanding talent and strength. But only this person. Chu Luiyue recalled what she heard from Zhong Sun. Could it be that the person whose name was erased was actually the dean's disciple? Chu Luyue sized up the azure cloud roll and was slightly stunned. She almost forgot one thing. Her name didn't seem to be on the azure cloud roll. Chu Luyue wasn't thinking of her current name, Chu Yu, but her previous name in Lingxiao College. Since she once wanted to surpass Rong Xiu's name on the azure cloud roll, then she should have the strength back then. At the very least, she should be on the azure cloud roll, right? But no. Chu Luyue looked back and forth several times, but she didn't see her name. Then, maybe she didn't use her real name back then. Chu Luyue's gaze lingered on the blank space, where the name was erased on the azure cloud roll for a while. A bold and absurd thought surged in her mind, but she quickly suppressed it. Not to mention other things. Just in the martial artist role alone, one must be a god-level powerhouse to enter the top 20. But she wasn't. She wasn't at her peak either. In that case, this conjecture seemed completely nonsensical. At this moment, a loud voice came from the crowd. Student Li Ziming challenges the 100th on the azure cloud roll, Sun Xiao. Chu Luyue looked in the direction of the voice. The one who spoke was a well-built, dark-skinned young man. His face was filled with nervousness and apprehension, but he could not hide the excitement in his eyes. Being able to ascend the ascension rankings was the greatest affirmation of a student's strength. There were a lot of people who had set this as their goal. They would constantly work hard and cultivate diligently, hoping that they would one day be able to make it onto the rankings. Of course, even those who were on the list did not dare to relax in the slightest, because they were at risk of being squeezed out at any time. Just like now, once someone was on the list, at the beginning of every month, someone would issue a challenge to them. After all, so long as there weren't any special circumstances, the people on the ascension rankings couldn't refuse the challenge at the beginning of the month. Otherwise, it would be seen as admitting defeat. Of course, if a few people wanted to challenge the same person at the same time, then the strongest would be determined from these few people, and the strongest would fight the person on the ascension rankings in the end. On the other hand, most of the people on the ascension rankings wanted to move up a rank. Therefore, those with lower rankings would also challenge those with higher rankings. However, for the past few years, no one had attempted to challenge the top 3 on the warrior ranking. The few people ranked below these 3 people often swapped their rankings, and their strength was almost equal. But it was as if they had an agreement, and no one took the initiative to challenge those higher up. Not to mention Rong Xiu, who was ranked first, or that mysterious person whose name had been erased from the second place. No one dared to challenge even the third place. Even the person ranked third was still in the academy until now. In short, the names at the top of the list were like mountains. Countless people wanted to climb and surpass them. But the truth was that even looking up at them was very difficult. Even those who had hopes of surpassing them didn't dare to casually make a move, let alone the others below. Li Ziming and Sun Zhao's challenge began very quickly. Subsequently, other people started to challenge one after another. Qingming Square was very large, and it was more than enough to accommodate all these people competing at the same time. In addition, there were elders at the side controlling the scene, so there was even less to worry. The challenge for Xian Masters also began very quickly. In comparison, the Celestial Physician's side was much more deserted. On one hand, there were very few Celestial Physician. On the other hand, everyone had a rough understanding of each other's strength during pill gambling. If they weren't certain of winning, they basically wouldn't challenge. After a long while, only a dozen people from the Celestial Physician's side stood up to challenge. As for the Weapon Refinement Masters, there was even less to say. Chu Luyue didn't have any doubts. As long as they had a bit of talent in weapon refinement, they could be on the list. Chu Yu, come, observe and learn more. In another 2 or 3 months, it'll be your turn. Elder Wanzheng called out. Chu Luyue walked back and stood at the side obediently. There were a total of 8 pill refining competitions going on at the same time in front of them. Chu Luyue even found a few of them familiar. She had indeed gotten to know many people during pill gambling on various mountains in the academy these few days. Kid, who do you think will win that round? Elder Wanzheng raised his chin and asked softly. Chu Luyue's eyes flickered slightly. Master, are you going to bet with me? Elder Wanzheng was speechless. Is this kid crazy about earning points? However, when he saw the serious expression on the young man's face, Elder Wanzheng realized that he wasn't joking. He seems to really want to earn points. You've just come to the academy. You'll have plenty of time to earn points in the future. Why are you in such a hurry? I'm just asking for your opinion. Before Elder Wanzheng could finish his words, he saw the young man smiling slightly. Master, the academy only stipulates that we can't gamble at the end of the month. There's no rule about the beginning of the month, right? Elder Wanzheng's eyelids twitched. I heard that every time it's this time, there will be some people who will start betting. To be honest, there are already a few people who came to ask for my opinion today. Chu Luo looked troubled. Tell me, should I say it or not? I'll give you the points later. Elder Wanzheng couldn't help but shout. Why didn't I notice that this kid knows how to play such a trick? He looks obedient and sensible, but now it seems that he's different from what I expected. Chu Luo then smiled in satisfaction. Her eyes curved into crescents, and her starry eyes sparkled. I knew Master is the best. However, this smile made Elder Wanzheng's eyelids twitch violently. You. Why do I feel like I've been cheated? And this feeling is strangely familiar. However, before he could think about it carefully, Chu Luo had already turned her head to look at the arena. She crossed her arms and gently rubbed her chin with one hand, as if she was deep in thought. I think this round should be. Under the sunlight, the young man's delicate face looked innocent and harmless. When he was thinking seriously, he was exceptionally quiet, and there was a special aura around him. Elder Wanzheng thought to himself that he was overthinking. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the sky. Rongxiu, do you dare to fight? Chapter 1131. His voice was like a sudden clap of thunder. It was earth-shattering. Everyone looked up in shock when they heard that. Someone wanted to challenge Rongxiu. When they saw who it was, the elders all revealed a look of understanding. It was him. Then it wasn't strange anymore. Some of the older students recognized him and exclaimed, In Shuli. He's out of seclusion. Many of them came back to their senses. In Shuli? The one who ranked third on the warrior leaderboard. That's him. He hasn't come out for a long time. I heard that he's been cultivating in seclusion. I didn't expect him to appear today. What's so strange about that? Didn't you hear that he's here to challenge Rongxiu? I'm afraid there's going to be a good show. In Shuli stood in the air with a silver spear in his hand. On the silver spear, there were several blue lines intertwined and gathered at the tip, forming a sharp blue spearhead. From afar, it looked like a silver-blue dragon with a heavy aura. He was dressed in black, and his figure was tall and straight. His face was angular, and his skin was wheat-colored. His pair of long and narrow eyes were as sharp as blades. If one looked into his eyes, his gaze seemed to be able to pierce through one's heart and look into the depths of one's heart. At that moment, his gaze was fixed on Rongxiu, who was standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower. Although he was expressionless, there was an undisguised fighting spirit in the depths of his eyes. Everyone could feel that he was eager to fight with Rongxiu. The aura on his body seemed to be sharper than the silver spear. Some people were born to fight. In Shuli was obviously such a person. Everything that was present was not important to him. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind: defeat Rongxiu. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Rongxiu. Curiosity, surprise, anticipation, nervousness, obviously. Everyone wanted to see Rongxiu's reaction. Besides that, they wanted to witness exactly how strong Rongxiu, who was ranked at the top of the Ascension rankings, was. One had to know that Rongxiu had not been in the academy for many years. Now that he had suddenly appeared, everyone naturally wanted to see for themselves if he was as powerful as the rumors said. However, Elder Bo Yin was the first to speak. Shuli, Rongxiu came back this time because he has something else to deal with. It's not. I accept your challenge. Before Elder Bo Yin could finish his words, he was interrupted by Rongxiu. On his noble and enchanting face, there was a carefree expression, and the corners of his eyes and brows seemed to hold a faint smile, as if he didn't take this matter to heart. Elder Bo Yin hesitated for a moment. Rongxiu, aren't you busy? It won't take long, Rong Xiao said with a faint smile. How arrogant. Such a thought flashed through everyone's minds. Wasn't he implying that he didn't need much time and energy to deal with Yin Shuli? He didn't take Yin Shuli seriously at all. However, even if Yin Shuli's ranking was lower than his on the Ascension rankings, he was still ranked third. Excluding the name that had mysteriously disappeared in the middle, the two of them were actually only one place apart. Moreover, Yin Shuli had been diligently cultivating in the academy for the past few years. It was rumored that his strength was almost comparable to some of the elders. However, he usually didn't come out and kept a low profile, so no one was very familiar with him. However, Rong Xiao actually said that in public. Wasn't he too arrogant? However, there was no anger on Yin Shuli's face. Instead, the battle intent in his eyes burned brighter. All right, then let's see who's stronger. Swoosh. With a flick of his wrist, the silver spear drew a beautiful arc in the air and pointed directly at Rong Xiao. Please. Chu Luiyue watched the scene from below. In fact, she was also very curious about how powerful Rong Xiao was. The two of them had sparred many times before, but she could clearly feel that Rong Xiao had suppressed his strength to a level that was only slightly higher than hers. This way, she thought that she had a chance of winning every time, but unfortunately, she was always a little short. It was easy to imagine how terrifying a person who could control his own strength so perfectly was. At this moment, Rong Xiao's figure flashed and appeared in front of Yin Shuli. The two of them faced each other from a distance. For some reason, the huge Qingming square suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere instantly became tense. It's been a long time since I've seen Rong Xiao fight. The people standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower also looked over. A young lady looked at the scene in the air in a daze and muttered softly. The last time I saw him fight, it was with... She suddenly stopped talking as she thought of something. Rong Xiao rarely sparred with others. Those who tried to challenge him basically gave up after sparring with him once and never sparred with him again. Only this Yin Shuli didn't give up. From this perspective, his courage is commendable. A young man at the side laughed. Counting carefully, this is already the 5th time Yin Shuli has challenged him, right? Rong Xiao found it strange that he actually agreed to it. In their opinion, Rong Xiao didn't have the patience and thought to agree to multiple challenges from the same person. Haha, other than the first time, didn't Rong Xiao intentionally agree to his challenge and fight him 3 times in a row because Yin Shuli beat up that person? As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The surrounding people looked at the young man, who spoke with a strange expression. Only then did the young man realize that he had said something wrong. He sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly covered his mouth. At the same time, he looked at Elder Bo Yin and the others with a panicked expression. Perhaps it was because they were still a distance away, or perhaps the elders weren't paying attention, but they didn't seem to have any reaction. Phew! The young man let out a long sigh, but there was still a lingering fear in his heart. He actually forgot about this taboo. You can't say that. Wei Shiping suddenly said coldly and broke the dead silence. I heard that Rong Xiao has been very busy these few years. Even the time he spent in the Yuntian Tower was very short. I don't know what he did, but I don't think he's focused on cultivation. On the other hand, Yin Shuli has been diligently cultivating. There might be a gap between the two of them before, but now, it's still unknown who's stronger. Digression. After running around outside for a whole day yesterday, he was completely crippled. Update continues at 6 p.m. Chapter 1132. Rong Xiao's talent was strong. A few years ago in the academy, he had always been stronger than them. However, if he neglected his cultivation, it would be impossible for him to regain his past glory after a few years, right? Other things aside, Yin Shuli was a lunatic when it came to fighting. With his current strength, he might really win against Rong Xiao. When the others heard this, they all had different expressions. They didn't say anything more and looked at the two people in the sky who were facing each other in the distance. Yin Shuli looked at Rong Xiao's empty hands and frowned. His originally expressionless face seemed even sharper. Where's your yuan instrument? Rong Xiao shook his head. I don't need those. Yin Shuli's expression turned cold. Looks like you're very confident in yourself. Rong Xiao, I've been cultivating hard for the past 3 years just for this day. Today I'll give it my all. I'll defeat you. A few years ago, after losing to Rong Xiao several times, Yin Shuli developed a strong fighting spirit against Rong Xiao. He had been waiting for an opportunity to turn the tables. However, Rong Xiao left the academy not long after that, and did not come back for the past 3 years. This caused him to not have a chance to fight Rong Xiao officially. This time, after knowing that Rong Xiao had returned, he immediately rushed over. Rong Xiao smiled faintly. Please. Yin Shuli narrowed his eyes, and the aura around him surged. A god-level expert. Exclamations came from the crowd. Judging by this aura, he must have broken through the demigod level and become a supreme god. Once a supreme god becomes a supreme god, but he's only 25 years old now, right? As expected of the martial artist ranked 3rd on the Green Cloud leaderboard. I wonder how powerful Rong Xiao is now. I heard that when he left the academy 3 years ago, he was already a supreme god. Now, the discussion from below entered Yin Shuli's ears, and made him even more eager to fight. Whoosh! With a wave of his arm, the silver spear in his hand suddenly pierced forward. Obsidian lightning spear. Chi. When he poured his origin power into the silver spear, the dark blue lines on the spear's body seemed to come alive, and began to dance wildly. A terrifying pressure spread out in all directions with him as the center. The sound of thunder rang out. Yin Shuli's figure flashed, and he had already charged in front of Rong Xiao in a blink of an eye. A spear thrust forward. No one could even see how he moved. Teleport. Chu Luwen narrowed his eyes. Above rank 9 warriors were demigods, and above demigods were high gods. Only when a cultivator broke through to the high god level would they be considered a true god level expert. Only when a cultivator reached this level would they be able to teleport without any external help. The distance of teleportation was different, depending on the strength of each person. In a real battle, this move was very crucial. However, Rong Xiao did not seem to be worried about this situation. In fact, when Yin Shuli appeared 3 steps away from him, his expression was still as calm as before. It was as if he had expected this. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. At this moment, Rong Xiao finally moved. He raised his right hand, reached forward, and grabbed the tip of the spear. Ah! Cries of surprise could be heard from the crowd. Many of the ladies looked nervous. Wei Shiping sneered. Pretentious fool. Yin Shuli's obsidian lightning spear was a true high-grade divine weapon. Rong Xiao's futile attempt to block it with his physical body was simply a pipe dream. People who were too arrogant would always pay the price for their arrogance. However, at this moment, Yin Shuli's expression suddenly changed. This was because he realized that the invincible obsidian lightning spear was easily blocked by Rong Xiao, and could not move forward. Even the sharp tip of the spear did not hurt Rong Xiao. Both sides were in a stalemate. Yin Shuli's expression turned serious, as he poured more force into the obsidian lightning spear. However, it still did not move an inch. At this moment, the crowd below finally realized that something was wrong. Logically speaking, Rong Xiao's hand should have been pierced through, but now, Yin Shuli suddenly thought of something and widened his eyes as he looked at Rong Xiao in disbelief. You've already cultivated to the level of a god. Crack. Before he could finish his sentence, Rong Xiao's hand suddenly clenched. The faint blue light flickered, but it did not seem to affect Rong Xiao at all. He decisively pulled and whipped out. Just like that, the obsidian lightning spear was released from Yin Shuli's control. Swoosh. Before the crowd could see it clearly, they could only hear the sharp sound of wind breaking. The next moment, the scene in the sky shocked them. The obsidian lightning spear had somehow fallen into Rong Xiao's hands. The terrifyingly sharp tip of the spear was pointed at Yin Shuli's chest. It was as if he could pierce Yin Shuli's heart if he moved an inch closer. The entire place was silent. Everyone was stunned as they watched the scene unfold before them. They did not know how to react. Rong Xiao had taken Yin Shuli's yuan instrument and turned the tables to attack, forcing Yin Shuli to a dead end. He only used one move. The crowd did not even know if this was considered one move. They did not even see Rong Xiao unleash his force. All they saw was a blur, and the two of them were completely reversed. Rongxiu lifted his chin slightly, his face still wearing the same casual smile. However, at this moment, there was an inexplicable pressure in the crowd's eyes. "Do you want me to continue?" Rongxiu's thin lips moved slightly as he said calmly. Inshuli's body tensed up. He could even feel that the cold and sharp tip of the spear had already pierced through his clothes and was firmly pressed against his chest. A sharp pain came from above. He did not need to look down to know that his chest was bleeding. If it went deeper, he would be dead on the spot. Looking at those unfathomable eyes, Inshuli did not doubt that Rongxiu was capable of doing such a thing. He pursed his lips, his face pale. After a while he let out a long sigh. "I admit defeat." Whoosh! The crowd below was in an uproar. He admitted defeat. Inshuli admitted defeat just like that. According to his combative nature, it was extremely difficult for him to admit defeat so easily. At the same time, it also meant that he was helpless against Rongxiu's counterattack. His yuan instrument had been taken away, and it was pressed against his chest. Anyone would have to admit defeat, right? Everything happened too quickly. Everyone was looking forward to an exciting fight, but Rongxiu did not give them such a chance. The crowd standing on the Donghuang bell tower was also shocked. Rongxiu has actually become so strong. Wei Shiping, didn't you just say that Inshuli could defeat Rongxiu? What do you think now? The surrounding people looked at Wei Shiping at the same time. Chapter 1133. Wei Shiping was shocked at first, but when he came back to his senses, his expression darkened. He gritted his teeth and said nothing, but the aura around him turned cold. He clenched his fists under his sleeves. Rongxiu. He did not waste his time in the past few years. Instead, he grew stronger. How did he do it? Wei Shiping was not the only one who was curious about this. Inshuli wanted to know more. His eyes were fixed on Rongxiu as he enunciated each word clearly. "You've already?" "Not yet." Rongxiu seemed to have expected him to say something. He smirked and tossed the obsidian lightning spear back. "But it's enough to deal with you." Inshuli grabbed the spear and looked at Rongxiu with a frown. His emotions were complicated. He suspected that Rongxiu had already cultivated a divine body. But if Rongxiu said he did not, then it should be true. But judging from the situation just now, it seemed like that was the case. There was no doubt that the gap between the two of them had widened again. Inshuli thought that he could close the gap between him and Rongxiu with his hard work over the past few years. He might even surpass him, but he did not expect that Rongxiu would improve even faster than him. He gripped the obsidian lightning spear tightly and looked down. There was already a smear of blood on his chest. If Rongxiu wanted to, he could take Inshuli's life right away. Inshuli took a deep breath. When he looked up at Rongxiu again, the shock and defeat in his eyes had disappeared. "I admit that I'm not as strong as you today. I admit defeat. But one day I'll beat you." Rongxiu raised an eyebrow. Inshuli would say this every time he lost. He was already used to it. But he would not give Inshuli the chance to do so. The battle between the two in the sky had ended, but the spectators were still in a daze. That's it. From the beginning to the end, the two of them had only exchanged one move. The entire process was so simple and straightforward that it made one's hair stand on end. But the more it was like this, the more it proved Rongxiu's strength. No one doubted that Inshuli was not strong enough. Among the top 3 on the warrior roll, he was the only one who had stayed in the academy for the past few years. Even so, no one dared to challenge him. How could it be so easy to defeat a 25-year-old high god? In the eyes of many students, Inshuli was the synonym of a genius and an expert. It was within sight but out of reach. However, such a person could not even withstand one move from Rongxiu. Rongxiu's strength was unimaginable. Senior brother Rongxiu is indeed powerful. He actually agreed to senior brother Inshuli's request so easily. There have long been rumors that he is the top genius of the academy over the years. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is a legendary existence. At first, I thought it was an exaggeration. Who knew? After seeing it with my own eyes, I realized that it was all true. It is a pity that senior brother Rongxiu has not been in the academy for the past few years. It is difficult to even meet him. This time he should not be staying for too long. For such a man, I wonder what kind of woman would be able to enter his eyes. Do you still need to ask? Of course it is Jiang Ji1. The immortal water mausoleum, where she is from, is the strongest tribe under the Yuntian Tower. Moreover, the two of them have known each other for a long time. They can be considered childhood sweethearts. Don't you know? Not long ago, senior brother Rong Xiu just got married to a princess. What? I heard that the princess is an outsider. Anyway, Jiang Ji1 has nothing to do with it. Many of the girls were discussing in low voices. There were also some who were quietly searching for Jiang Ji1's figure. Those gazes landed on Jiang Ji1, making her feel uneasy. She did not know how much effort she had to expend to resist the urge to turn around and run away. When she came to the academy, Rong Xiu had coincidentally left the academy. The two of them did not spend time together at the academy, but in reality, other than the freshmen who had just arrived, more than half of Lingxiao College's students knew that she liked Rong Xiu. Among them, there were some who added fuel to the fire. Of course, she also did it on purpose. Jiang Ji1 was beautiful and had outstanding talent. Naturally, she was like the moon surrounded by stars in the academy. Many of her seniors and juniors had a good impression of her, and had even pursued her passionately. But they were all rejected by Jiang Ji1. At first, no one knew why she did so. But later on, there was news that although she was born in the immortal water mausoleum, she was favored by the Yuntian Tower's tribe leader. Therefore, she grew up there. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the spoiled eldest daughter of the Yuntian Tower. Because of this, everyone naturally associated her with Rong Xiu. Some people came to her in private to ask about it. Jiang Ji1 did not admit it, but she did not deny it either. Thus gradually, everyone knew about this matter. Many people silently agreed that Jiang Ji1 and Rong Xiu would be together. But who would have thought that in the end, another woman would suddenly appear and become Rong Xiu's princess consort? Now there were those who sympathized with Jiang Ji1, those who mocked her, and those who wanted to see her make a fool of herself. How could Jiang Ji1 not know that? So at this moment, those eyes and comments made her feel even more uncomfortable. She wanted to leave, but she could not bear to. So she could only stand there and suffer. Chu Liyue also heard such comments. He raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling a little strange. Rong Xiu could be considered a celebrity in Lingxiao College. Chu Yu? Chu Yu. A familiar voice suddenly sounded. Chu Liyue turned his head, and was surprised to see who it was. Miss Luo, why are you here? She should be with the martial artists. Why did she come to the celestial physician's side? You are here to see me? Chu Liyue asked tentatively. Luo Shishir's cheeks were slightly red, and her eyes were bright as she looked at Chu Liyue. Yes, I'm here to congratulate you. Congratulations on becoming Elder Wanzheng's disciple. I heard that Elder Wanzheng has high standards. You're the only one who has succeeded in the past few years. So it's really about this. Chu Liyue smiled. Thank you. Congratulations to you too. Your master seems to be Elder Wensi, right? Yes. Luo Shishir nodded, obviously very happy. Elder Wensi was one of the top elders in the academy, and he had a good personality. Luo Shishir felt very lucky to be able to become his student. Brother Sheng is the same as me, following Elder Wensi. As for fifth brother, he followed Elder Huafeng. Originally, he wanted to follow seventh madam like fourth brother. However, seventh madam has already recruited quite a number of students, so fifth brother still chose Elder Huafeng. Actually, the strength of these two elders was not much different. As long as one cultivated diligently, there would not be much difference. Chu Liyue smiled. That's great. Congratulations to you guys too. The young man's smile was gentle, and his eyes were delicate and pretty. This smile seemed to make everything around him lose its color. Luo Shishir was momentarily absent-minded, and then for some reason, her face turned slightly red. We said we were going to celebrate tonight. Are you coming? When Rong Xiu looked down, he saw this scene. The handsome youth and the pretty girl stood opposite each other. The girl's face was slightly red, and her eyes were bright with shyness and joy. As for the youth, he lowered his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Then, he raised his eyes and smiled brightly at the girl. Rongxiu's brows moved slightly, and he smiled faintly, but his eyes were covered with a thin layer of frost. He had just arrived, and he already had an appointment with a girl. Chapter 1134. Sure, Chu Luiyue said with a smile. As a newcomer, she was not familiar with many people in the academy. It was probably because they had all entered on the same day, and had passed the assessment at the beginning of the month. They had officially become Lingxiao College's students, so it was rare for them to be close to each other. Even though Zhuosheng wasn't very polite to her at the start, Chu Luiyue realized that he didn't have any bad intentions after they got familiar with each other. He was just a little hot-tempered and a little careless. In fact, these people's characters were not bad. In addition, Chu Luiyue already knew that they were from Mingxiaxi's Luo family, a real first-class family. Even compared to Yuntian Tower, it was not inferior. It was quite rare to come from such a big family and not have an arrogant temperament. Chu Luiyue wanted to make friends with them, so she agreed to Luo Shishir's invitation. Hearing Chu Luiyue's affirmative answer, Luo Shishir was very happy. Then let's meet at Thousand Wine Mountain tonight. Thousand Wine Mountain was a mountain peak in Lingxiao College. It was at the intersection of the Celestial Physician and the Weapon Refiner School in the northwest. It was called this because there was a very magical spring on Thousand Wine Mountain. The water that gushed out of the spring naturally had the fragrance of wine. When drunk, it tasted very similar to wine, but it was not intoxicating. Therefore, the students in the academy liked to go there. It could be considered a popular place for students to relax in the academy. Chu Luiyue naturally nodded in agreement. Okay. After receiving Chu Luiyue's affirmative answer, Luo Shishir secretly sighed in relief and felt a little happy at the same time. She did not know why, but when Chu Yu was 3 years younger than her, she always felt inexplicably nervous when standing in front of him. He seemed to have an innate noble aura that made people not dare to slight him. Sensing the substantial gaze from the sky, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly and looked up. Sensing her gaze, Luo Shishir also looked over. Senior Rongxiu is very powerful. She praised from the bottom of her heart. It would be great if I could have the chance to fight him once. Chu Luiyue glanced back at her with a smile on his face. Why? Do you like Rongxiu too? This also was naturally in comparison to the infatuated women around him. Luo Shishir quickly shook her head in denial. How could this be? I just feel that he's very powerful. After all, he's an existence that can continuously dominate the rankings for several years. All the students in the academy should want to reach the same height as him, right? With Yin Shuli as an example, Luo Shishir didn't even dare to say that she could surpass Rongxiu. As it turned out, it was difficult for them to even catch up to him. And then, senior brother Rongxiu already has a consort. Perhaps it was because of the inexplicable nervousness in her heart. Luo Shishir didn't notice that when the young man in front of her mentioned Rongxiu, he didn't say the word senior brother. His tone and attitude were also very calm and natural. It was completely different from the way the other students in the academy treated Rongxiu with respect, envy or jealousy. That's true. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. At the very least, she really wanted to fight with him now. Chu Luiyue and Luo Shishir stood together and talked. From above, it looked like the two of them were chatting happily together. Rongxiu! Elder Bo Yin shouted twice before Rongxiu came back to his senses. What are you looking at? Rongxiu calmly retracted his gaze and smiled faintly. Nothing. With that, he flew back to the Donghuang Bell Tower. Yin Shuli said, We'll fight another day. Then he quickly turned and left. No one stopped him. No one would be able to stay after being defeated so badly in front of everyone. Moreover, Yin Shuli had been waiting for this battle for a long time. Without a doubt, this was a huge blow to him. However, Yin Shuli had a good point. The more he was defeated, the braver he became. If others lost, it was inevitable that they would be sad and frustrated. If it happened too many times, or if the situation was more serious, they might not be able to recover. However, Yin Shuli would never have such a problem. This defeat only served to ignite his fighting spirit even more. From this point of view, His belligerent personality was also beneficial. The match started abruptly and ended in an even more unexpected manner. Before the crowd could react, it was already over. Many people were still unsatisfied. Sigh, what a pity. I thought I would be able to watch an exciting battle. I didn't expect. He defeated his opponent with one move, and it was against Yin Shuli. In the entire academy, I'm afraid only senior brother Rong Xiu can do this, right? I wanted to take the opportunity to observe, but now it looks like I won't be able to. If only I came to the academy a few years earlier, I might have been able to watch more of senior brother Rong Xiu's battles. Haha, you're thinking too much. Who in Lingxiao Academy doesn't know that senior brother Rong Xiu never fights a second round with anyone? Hearing the discussions below, the people standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower secretly exchanged looks of tacit understanding and smiled. To most people, Rong Xiu indeed did not have the patience to fight a second round with someone he had defeated. However, Yin Shuli was not the only exception. There was only one person who made Rong Xiu make an exception from the beginning to the end. The two of them would have a friendly spar every few days, and no one knew how many times they had fought. In the beginning, that person always lost. However, Rong Xiu seemed to have infinite patience and tolerance for the other party, and almost gave in to all of his requests. However, that was a long time ago. Not long after that person left the academy, or rather, disappeared. Rong Xiu returned to the Yuntian Tower, and rarely came to the academy. Naturally, he did not have the chance to see the various scenes from the past. Why, do you have a junior brother or junior sister that you like? Elder Bo Yin asked jokingly. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment, then nodded seriously. There's one and it's not bad. Oh. Elder Bo Yin originally came to tease, but when he heard Rong Xiu's words, he could not help but be surprised. He looked down. Which one is it? Rong Xiu smiled. You already know, so why ask? Elder Bo Yin widened his eyes slightly. It's really Chuyu? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded. He is quite good at celestial physician. That's true. After Elder Bo Yin recovered from his shock, he quickly accepted Rong Xiu's words. That child is indeed not bad. Otherwise, he would not have caught Elder Wanzheng's eye. Although he could not be compared to that person back then, there were some similarities. Elder Bo Yin looked carefully at the young man standing below, stroking his beard and saying seriously, this young man is a genius. If he is properly groomed in the future, he will definitely have a bright future. Chapter 1135. Bo Yin, you think so too? Just then, Elder Wensi appeared out of nowhere, and chuckled as he reminded them proudly. That child. I recruited him. When I saw him a few days ago, I felt that his talent was amazing and he was obedient. He would definitely do well in the future. What do you think? My eyes are good, right? Sigh. The only pity is that this child went to cultivate celestial physician. If he was a martial artist, tsk. Elder Wensi was happy and regretful at the same time. He was happy that such an outstanding new student was recruited by him. It was a pity that this child could not cultivate with him. Elder Wanzheng, that old bastard, had taken advantage of him for nothing. Wanzheng owes me a big favor this time, Elder Wensi said confidently. Rong Xiu looked at him with a strange expression. It was not certain who owed who. Didn't you also take in a few students? One of them seems to be a direct descendant of Mingxiaxi's Luo family? Elder Bo Yin smiled. Isn't that enough? Elder Wensi coughed. Isn't this the more the better? The more the better. Rong Xiu looked down again before slowly bidding farewell to everyone. Elder Bo Yin, I still need to go back and prepare for the matter we talked about earlier, so I won't stay any longer. The elders were not surprised that Rong Xiu wanted to leave. It was already rare that he was willing to show up. Moreover, he had just fought with Yin Shuli. All right, I'll send someone. Thank you for your kindness, Elder Bo Yin, but there's no need for that for now. Rong Xiu smiled. Although I haven't returned for a few years, this student is still very familiar with the academy. It was rare for Elder Bo Yin to hear him refer to himself like this. He felt rather emotional and nodded. All right then, I'll leave it to you. Rongxiu left quickly. Seeing his figure disappear, many people were disappointed. However, they also knew that Rongxiu was no longer in the academy. It was already very difficult to meet him, so they didn't dare to ask for more. Wei Shiping and the others also left not long after he left. Only the elders were left on the Donghuang Bell Tower. Meanwhile, the competition on the Qingming Square was still in full swing. As the competition progressed, the rankings on the Ascension rankings gradually changed as well. Those who successfully made it onto the list naturally cheered, while those who unfortunately failed were disappointed. The competition for the rankings was even more intense. Everyone was a genius from all over the world. Except for a few monstrous existences, most people's talents were actually about the same. Under such circumstances, the competition between the strong and the weak would be very intense. At this moment, Chu Liyue finally found out that the higher one's ranking was on the Ascension rankings, the longer one stayed on the rankings, and the more points one possessed. As for those who dominated the rankings, there was no need to even mention them. She thought about how she had painstakingly earned more than 20,000 points, and in the blink of an eye, 5,000 points were deducted. Chu Liyue was very heartbroken. The fastest way to earn points was to actually get onto the Ascension rankings. However, even if she was the celestial physician that she was most confident in, the 100th place was still at the peak of the 9th grade. If she wanted to defeat him, she had to at least be able to refine a pill of the same grade. Chu Liyue was a little troubled. Chu Yu, what are you thinking about? Luo Shishir asked. Chu Liyue gently rubbed her chin with one hand. I'm thinking how to get onto the Ascension rankings. Luo Shishir couldn't help but laugh out loud. You're already thinking about this problem? Isn't it? A little early? I'm thinking that it's better to be a little stronger and have a little more confidence to succeed in one go. What do you think? These words were already rather tactful. As if she didn't want to dampen Chu Liyue's enthusiasm, she added another sentence. According to your talent, it shouldn't take long, right? Chu Liyue's eyes flickered as she smiled. You're right. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Since it was so difficult to get onto the Celestial Physician ranking, the competition for the other two rankings would only be even more intense. Among these rankings, only the Weapon Refiner ranking with less than 100 people would have the least competition. Right. Weapon Refiner. Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly lit up as she looked towards the north. If she could display her talent as a weapon refiner, then she might be able to get onto the rankings directly? Thinking about it carefully, she had actually forged yuan tools before. Back then, the Cloud Sky copper sword that Chang Wanzhou used was sharpened by her. Although it wasn't considered a complete weapon refiner, but maybe she could really give it a try? Thinking of this, Chu Liyue walked towards the direction of the weapon refiner. Hearing Chu Liyue's footsteps, Elder Run Ran, who was standing under the weapon refiner ranking drowsily, opened one of his eyes. Oh, it's still that freshman who was casually strolling around. I think he's the one who became Wan Zheng's disciple? Then, Elder Run Ran saw the young man walking straight towards him and standing in front of him. Greetings, Elder. Elder Run Ran opened his second eye and said lazily, What are you doing? If an ordinary person saw him for the first time, they would definitely think that he was arrogant and rude. But in fact, those who were familiar with Elder Run Ran, or rather, those who were familiar with the temperament of the weapon refiners, would know that this was already a very polite situation. And it was still because of Elder Wanzheng. Chu Liyue didn't mind. She bowed respectfully and asked, I want to get onto the weapon refiner ranking. Elder Run Ran reacted for a moment before standing up straight. He sized up Chu Liyue from head to toe and suddenly laughed. I couldn't tell, but you have a treasure on you. It was rare to see an origin tool that could avoid his detection and completely conceal the aura on its body. Kid, what rank are you now? Chu Liyue paused and said honestly, I'm at the early stage of the 7th rank. She should be able to break through to the middle stage of the 7th rank soon. But she didn't say that. What? Early stage of the 7th rank? Elder Run Ran widened his eyes in surprise, then slapped his thigh and laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha. You brat. You're really a newborn calf who isn't afraid of tigers. Do you know that to get onto the weapon refiner ranking, you have to at least be a demigod? You're still far from being a rank 7 warrior. Elder Run Ran's laughter immediately attracted the attention of many people. After hearing his words, everyone's eyes turned to Chu Luiyue. What else did they not understand? This brat who just entered the school wanted to get onto the weapon refiner ranking with his strength as a rank 7 warrior? It was simply a fantasy. He didn't even know the minimum requirements to be on the ranking. Wasn't he too naive? Kid, it's a good thing to get onto the Azure Cloud ranking. However, you have to see if you have the ability to do so. You should go back and wash up before sleeping. Chapter 1136. As Elder Run Ran spoke, he was about to close his eyes again. Elder, this student has something to ask of you. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised by his words, but she didn't give up immediately. After pondering for a moment, she still spoke. She wasn't a demigod, but she had a strand of divine power in her body. More importantly, she had already forged the Cloud Sky Copper sword a long time ago, although the Tianlei at that time was attracted by the Taizu. But she was indeed the one who cleaned up the Tianlei later on. Elder Run Ran opened his eyes and looked at her lazily. Speak. If a person's strength hasn't reached the demigod level, then is there really no way to determine if he has talent in refining? Why are you so obsessed with this? Elder Run Ran laughed and looked at her, as if he was looking at an ignorant child who was throwing a tantrum. He pointed to the side. If you really want to be on the Qingyan leaderboard, go back and study alchemy properly. Perhaps you can get there faster. You should give up on being a refiner. Elder Run Ran didn't feel that it was useful to say so much to a young man who had just reached the 7th rank. In his opinion, Chu Luiyue was acting like this because of novelty. But in reality, how could it be so easy to be a refiner? Many cultivators who had reached the demigod level couldn't even touch the edge of being a refiner, let alone a child like this? Chu Luiyue paused. I heard that refiners use the power of Tianlei to forge yuan tools. If this student can do it, can I also be considered a refiner? Of course. What? Elder Run Ran choked and looked at Chu Luiyue with a bewildered expression. What did you just say? You can trigger Tianlei to forge yuan tools? Chu Luiyue blinked and nodded slightly. Impossible. This is impossible. Unless... Elder Run Ran suddenly paused. You have contracted a divine beast? To Elder Run Ran, there was only one possibility to be able to trigger Tianlei without reaching the demigod level. It meant that a cultivator had contracted a divine beast. When a human formed a contract with a divine beast, a wisp of heavenly energy that originally belonged to the divine beast would enter the cultivator's body. Relying on this, it was not impossible to trigger the heavenly lightning. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed as he nodded. Yes. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was so insistent, Elder Run Ran had no other choice but to mutter. If that's the case, I can give it a try. However, if you get hurt later, this old man won't be responsible. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Thank you, Elder. Chu Yu, what are you doing? Luo Shirshir walked over, her eyes filled with confusion. You want to enter the weapon refiner ranking? Why did he come to the blacksmith ranking instead of the celestial physician ranking? Chu Luiyue nodded with an indifferent expression. Luo Shirshir wanted to persuade him, but for some reason, when she saw the young man's calm appearance, the word stuck in her throat suddenly couldn't leave her mouth. She hesitated for a moment and stood aside. At this time, most people's attention was still on the other 3 rankings. Although some people noticed the situation here, they didn't take it to heart. How many years had it been since the Armament Master Leaderboard had any movement, and a new student, who had just joined the academy, could he really create any waves? Elder Run Ran took out a fist-sized green jade stone. This is the Illusion God Pearl. There are several Tianlei stored in it. As long as you can summon it, you will succeed. The Armament Master's examination was relatively simple, because it was quite troublesome to take the blacksmith assessment on the spot. Therefore, most of the time, the elders would use this Illusion God Pearl to test the student's talent and potential. If one could trigger the Tianlei stored in it, it proved that one could become a blacksmith. According to the number of Tianlei summoned, the talent represented is different. Elder Run Ran handed over the illusion god pearl. As long as you can summon one Tianlei, you will succeed. Girl, do you need my help? Taizu's voice rang out. Thank you, Taizu, but I'll do this assessment myself. Chu Luiyue said in her heart. On one hand, if Taizu made a move, they might be detected on the spot. On the other hand, she really wanted to see if she could do it. She took the illusion god pearl with both hands. The illusion god pearl was green, lustrous, translucent, and cold to the touch. Chu Luiyue stared at the illusion god pearl in her hand, took a deep breath and focused. There were a total of 4 special powers in her body. 2 of the heavenly path's powers entered her body when she contracted with the 2 divine beasts. The other was gathered from Taizu's Tianling god realm. The last divine power was taken from the power left behind by Taizu in the northern underworld. The so-called divine power and the heavenly path's power came from the same source. Every divine beast was blessed by the heavenly path and was born between heaven and earth. They were inextricably linked to the heavenly path. The power in their bodies naturally contained a portion of the heavenly path's mysteries. In other words, they were born with the heavenly path's power. But it was different for humans. All cultivators would only have a chance to touch the heavenly path after they had completely broken through to the god level and converted all their origin power into divine power. Only the top experts who had truly touched the heavenly path would have divine power that contained the heavenly path's might. Only at this level would humans have a chance to reach the same level as divine beasts. This was also why divine beasts were born proud and noble. Compared to all living things in the world, divine beasts were the most favored existence by the heavens. The divine power that Chu Luiyue took contained a trace of the heavenly path's aura. Although it was weak, perhaps because Taizu in the northern underworld was already a god-level expert when he left this power behind, it was more or less comparable to the heavenly path's power left behind by a demigod like Taizu. So in summary, Chu Luiyue had 4 types of heavenly path's power in her body. If she wanted to trigger Tianlei, this should be enough. However, for safety's sake, Chu Luiyue still chose to use the heavenly path's power that she had obtained through the contract with Dumpling. A vigorous aura spread out from Chu Luiyue's dantian, and then surged toward her hands. Buzz! The illusion god pearl seemed to have sensed something, and let out a soft sound. At the same time, ripples appeared on its surface. The ripples gradually spread inwards. There seemed to be something surging inside the translucent green jade. Seeing this, Elder Ren Ran, who was originally dismissive of Chu Luiyue, straightened his back subconsciously, and the laziness in his eyes disappeared. Soon a faint blue Tianlei flashed. Crack! Although this was a miniature version, because it was the real Tianlei, its might was still not to be underestimated. Elder Ren Ran's face lit up. You're really, however, before he could finish his sentence, the Tianlei that had just been summoned seemed to have encountered something terrifying, and with a whoosh, it ran back and quickly disappeared. Chu Luiyue was confused. Chapter 1137. The scene was very awkward. Elder Run Ran rubbed his eyes hard, and only then did he confirm that the Tianlei in the illusion god pearl had indeed disappeared completely. Then he looked at Chu Luiyue strangely. Chu Luiyue looked up innocently and met his eyes. What happened just now? I don't know either. You don't know? That Tianlei clearly came out, but it went back. The illusion god pearl is in your hands, and you don't know? Elder, you're very knowledgeable, so you should know better, right? But I've never seen such a situation before. Elder Run Ran held his forehead and felt a headache coming on. He was the one who took out the illusion god pearl, but the one who tested it was Chuyu. In the end, it was Chuyu's problem. But he also seemed to be at a loss. Could it be that he really didn't know what was going on? Try again, Elder Run Ran said. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly and tried again. This time, she used the heavenly Dao power left behind when she made the contract with the three-eyed eagle. She held the illusion god pearl with both hands. Soon the same fluctuation was produced again. Elder Run Ran's heart was also in his mouth. As long as that Tianlei appeared long enough, it could be considered a success. At first, he didn't take the young man in front of him seriously. But now, after experiencing the scene just now, he vaguely felt that this Chuyu might really have some talent. It was really not easy to recruit a disciple for the artificer school. Therefore, Elder Run Ran's originally indifferent attitude had also changed. He secretly had some expectations in his heart. I hope this young man can succeed. Crack. A bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly appeared. Elder Run Ran was delighted, but before he could smile, the bolt of heavenly lightning vanished once more. This time, it was even worse than the previous time. It only came out for a moment, and then quickly retreated. It didn't even let others see what it looked like. Looking at the empty illusion god pearl, Chu Luiyue and Elder Run Ran were silent for a moment. You. Elder Run Ran took a deep breath and looked up at her. Haha, I knew he couldn't do it. How can it be so easy to become an armament master? That's right. Even if you have some talent in celestial physician, you don't have to be so ostentatious, right? Could it be that you think you're an all-rounder like senior martial brother Rongxiao? He's just a rank 7 warrior, and he dares to challenge me like this. His courage is really commendable. Sounds of discussion came from behind. They were standing quite far away, so they couldn't see the lightning bolt that flashed across the illusion god pearl. Hence, they thought that Chu Luiyue couldn't summon it at all. His words were filled with undisguised mockery and sarcasm. In the Spirit Firmament Academy, although the overall atmosphere was not bad, it did not mean that everyone was amiable in private. Chu Luiyue had performed very well in the Celestial Physician's examination. Some people were envious, and some were jealous. In the eyes of those people, her current behavior was nothing more than a meaningless show of strength. What are you talking about? Luo Shishir frowned and turned back to reprimand them. She was a noble lady carefully nurtured by an aristocratic family. Although she had a gentle temper, when she was angry, the invisible aura on her body was enough to shock people. Those students who were swept by her gaze shut their mouths. Even if they were unhappy, Luo Shishir was still a member of the Luo family, and they didn't dare to offend her. Moreover, there were several people in the Luo family, such as Luo Yanlin, who were quite reputable in the college. There was really no need to provoke them. Miss Luo, don't be angry over these trivial matters. Upon hearing this, Chu Luiyue turned around and smiled slightly. Luo Shishir pursed her lips. They said that about you. Actually, they're not wrong. I don't seem to have any talent in this area. Chu Luiyue said as she returned the illusion god pearl. I don't seem to be compatible with this thing. This scene was actually not unfamiliar to her. It seemed to be the same when she was forging the Cloud Sky Copper sword. It was just that the situation back then was much more intense and real than now. Although she felt that she could forcefully capture Tianlei back, she gave up considering that there were so many people watching. Elder Run Ran took the illusion god pearl and looked at it carefully. Finally, he looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. What a pity. Logically speaking, you're not completely without talent as a weapon refiner. But, however, it didn't seem to be enough, or there were other problems. In short, Chu Yu failed to summon Tianlei. This test could only be considered a failure. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to be disappointed, and only smiled faintly. I know. Sorry to trouble you. With that, she left without any reluctance. Sigh. Luo Shishir hurriedly followed and carefully looked at her expression, as if she wanted to say something but hesitated. Chu Luiyue smiled. Miss Luo, if you have something to say, just say it. Luo Shishir was stunned. We can be considered friends now. You can call me by my name. Miss Luo sounded too distant and polite. Chu Luiyue followed suit. Sure. Luo Shishir's eyelashes trembled slightly, as if something was gently rubbing against her heart. Chu Luiyue didn't notice it. She recalled the situation just now and smiled. Don't worry, I'm fine. Elder Run Ran is right. It's not so easy to be a weapon refiner. I just wanted to give it a try and see if I have the potential in this area. If I do, it's naturally good. If I don't, there's nothing to feel bad about. After all, the corners of her lips curled up slightly, but her eyes were filled with confidence. My talent as a celestial physician is not bad. As she spoke, Her gaze swept across the surrounding people. The people who were discussing her earlier became quieter. No matter what, she was the only disciple that Elder Wanzheng had taken a fancy to in the past 3 years. Just this alone was enough to beat up countless people. What right did they have to ridicule her? Seeing that she didn't seem to feel bad about it, Luo Shishir heaved a sigh of relief. That's true. Lingxiao College has recruited countless students over the years, but less than 100 people can make it to the weapon refiner list. It's normal that you can't make it. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes, and her gaze fell on the name at the top of the list. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Well, this is enough to show how powerful the people who can make it to the list are. Luo Shishir followed her line of sight and smiled. Yes, if all of them are as powerful as senior brother Rong Xiao, how amazing would that be? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything else. At this moment, a familiar male voice suddenly came from not far away. Sure. Luo Yanlin saw that his sister and the young man were standing together and seemed to be very close. He couldn't help but raise his voice. Come here. Chapter 1138. My fourth brother is calling me. I'm leaving now. See you tonight. Luo Shishir said softly to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Luo Shishir pursed her lips into a smile and turned to leave with light footsteps. For some reason, Chu Luiyue felt a faint chill envelop her. She looked over and realized that the faintly discernible threatening aura came from Luo Yanlin. Luo Yanlin seemed to be a little surprised by her sharp senses. A trace of astonishment flashed across his face, and he immediately narrowed his eyes. The warning in his eyes was obvious. Chu Luiyue understood what he meant, but she was confused. Warning, Luo Yanlin was warning her for no reason. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. Could it be because of Luo Shishir? Thinking about it carefully, she was with Luo Shishir just now. It might have been a misunderstanding. Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. Luo Yanlin is thinking too much, isn't he? Suddenly her heart skipped a beat. If Luo Yanlin thinks this way, then Rong Xiao. She shook her head and suppressed these messy thoughts. Since I've officially become a student of Lingxiao College, it's most important to improve my strength as soon as possible. Besides, there's also Jun Jiuqing. A few days ago, Chu Luiyue had already asked around and found out that Jun Jiuqing was considered an influential figure in the college. He was one of the top students in the college a few years ago. He had outstanding talent and improved at lightning speed. He once used only 3 months to climb from the bottom 10 to the top 20 of the Qinyan roll. This speed was heaven-defying. However, he only stayed in the college for a short period of time and left not long after. He never returned after that. As for his ranking, it slowly slid down in the following period of time, and now it was already in the 30s. However, many people still had a deep impression of him. This was because his master was a famous figure in the college, Elder Kulan. There were at least 180 elders in Lingxiao College. Elder Kulan was not the strongest among them, but he was still very famous. This was because he and the current dean were fellow disciples of the same sect. And their teacher was the previous dean of Lingxiao College. It was rumored that the dean had intended to choose between the two of them to inherit his position. He had always doted on his little disciple Kulan. Everyone thought that this was his plan. However, he did not expect that in the end, he did not choose Kulan. Instead, he chose his eldest disciple, who was the current dean. Regarding this matter, everyone had different opinions. He also said that Kulan had done something wrong and angered the old principal, which was why she was stripped of her qualifications. There were also some who said that Kulan was framed and implicated innocently, which was why she was forced to hand over the position of dean to someone else. In short, no one could clearly explain what happened back then. However, the relationship between the dean and Elder Kulan seemed to be peaceful. As for the inside story, only they knew. However, it was also because of this that Elder Kulan's position in the academy was very special. All these years, he had only recruited 3 students. Jun Jiuqing was the third one. Now Jun Jiuqing did not seem to have returned to the academy. Chu Luiyue could only temporarily suppress her thoughts and wait quietly. Since Jun Jiuqing wanted to use Chu Ning to threaten her, He would not dare to go too far. In this regard, Chu Luiyue could somewhat be at ease. Now all she could do was to raise her cultivation as quickly as possible, while secretly searching for the truth. Fourth brother, why are you looking for me? Luo Shishi returned to Luo Yinlin's side and asked. Luo Yinlin sized her up. When did you become so close to that Chuyu? Luo Shishi was stunned, and then her face turned slightly red. No, I just felt that since we entered the academy on the same day, it could be considered fate, so I thought that it would be good to be friends. Luo Yinlin's gaze was somewhat scrutinizing. However, seeing that his sister was slightly nervous, he could not bear to push her too hard, so he could only tactfully nod. That kid is somewhat talented in celestial physician, so it's fine to be friends. However, since you're already in the academy, your focus should still be on cultivation. Breaking through to the 9th rank is just the beginning for you. Only by being on the Azure Cloud leaderboard can our Luo family's reputation not be tarnished. Luo Shishi's expression became much more serious. Fourth brother is right, Shishi will remember. That's good, go back and cultivate diligently. The lively examination at the beginning of the month finally came to an end in the evening. The qualified new students all had their own places to go, and most of them were excited and looking forward to life in the academy. On the Azure Cloud leaderboard, other than the blacksmith leaderboard which remained unchanged, there were some changes to the other 3 leaderboards. Some were on the leaderboard, some were off the leaderboard. Some were happy, some were regretful. However, this had nothing to do with Chu Luiyue. After the examination, Chu Luiyue and Elder Wanzheng discussed that they would formally learn the next day, and then left Qingming Square and returned to their own residence. In the room, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and fell into deep thought. Taizu, what do you think is going on with the illusion god Pearl? Chu Luiyue murmured in confusion. If she didn't have talent, then Tianlei clearly came out. If I say I have it, that thing just came out and went back. Taizu was silent for a while, and then said faintly, maybe you're too fierce? Chu Luiyue. Am I? Taizu, heh. Was he the one who forcibly captured those Tianlei people back then? Chu Luiyue. Cough. Wasn't that a special situation? Who would have thought that these Tianlei people would be like this? If you restrain yourself a little more, maybe it'll be better. Taizu thought for a while. But the chances are not high. Some things can't be hidden anymore. You should give up. Chu Luiyue. Originally, she really wanted to learn how to forge a divine artifact. After thinking for a long time, Chu Luiyue couldn't figure it out, so she simply gave up. If she didn't want to cultivate, then so be it. She would first complete Elder Wanzheng's goal and get on the celestial physician list. Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts and began to focus on cultivation. The surrounding heaven and earth force flowed into her body and gradually formed an energy vortex above her head. Ever since she broke through to rank 7 and recovered her Tianjing Yuan Meridian, Chu Luiyue's speed of devouring the force was much faster than before. Naturally, it was more convenient and faster for her to cultivate. Time passed bit by bit. The sky quickly darkened. The moon was in the middle of the sky. Unknowingly, a tall and slender figure quietly approached. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. She threw a punch. Bang! A warm and broad palm had already grasped her hand with great precision. A familiar cold fragrance attacked her. In an instant it filled her body. Rongxiu had already approached her. You deliberately made me wait for so long, His low and mellow voice was as seductive as the spring breeze in the dark night, making one's heart itch slightly. Digression, it's done. Chapter 1139. A subtle numbness spread from the tip of her ear to half of her body. Chu Luiyue curled her fingers and simply relaxed her body. She looked back at him with a faint smile. This is really a misunderstanding. Senior brother Rongxiu, why did you come to my place in the middle of the night, instead of discussing important matters with the elders? Rongxiu looked at her sparkling eyes. Even in the dark night, they were still as bright as the stars, and they had a moving glow to them. He tightened his hand and played with her delicate and soft palm, but there was a hint of laziness in his tone. Are you angry? Chu Luiyue stared at him and shook her head. I'm just curious why you don't want me to come to the academy. It's not that I don't want to, but... Rong Xiu paused and recalled the scene when he saw Elder Huafeng and the others. It seemed that they hadn't been so happy and relaxed for a long time today. On the East Emperor Bell Tower, Elder Wenxi even proudly announced that Chu Luiyue was recruited by him. If they knew her true identity, even if I didn't want you to come, aren't you here now? Rong Xiu held his forehead helplessly, and a doting and indulgent smile hung on his thin lips. Chu Luiyue suddenly had an idea. You already knew? Rong Xiu hugged her slender waist from behind and held her tightly. Then, he rested his chin on her shoulder and said in a low and teasing voice, "It would be strange if I couldn't even guess what my princess wanted to do. But, I just didn't expect you to be so fast." According to Chu Luiyue's intelligence and alertness, she would have noticed that something was wrong sooner or later. However, he didn't expect her to make up her mind so early and come directly to Lingxiao College. Chu Luiyue thought to herself, that's true. If she hadn't accidentally talked to Lin Qifei about this matter that day, she wouldn't have acted so decisively. Anyway, I'm already a student of Lingxiao College. It's impossible for you to make me leave. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Without Rong Xiu, there was no point in staying in the Yuntian Tower. She still felt that this place was more interesting. Rong Xiu suddenly laughed. Chu Luiyue could even clearly feel the vibration of his chest. The man's scorching body temperature penetrated through the thin layers of clothes and spread to her body, even spreading to the bottom of her heart. That won't happen, said Rong Xiu with a smile. You can stay here as long as you want. I'll help you deal with the Yuntian Tower. This time, Chu Luiyue was really surprised. With a little force, she broke free from Rong Xiu's embrace and turned to look at him seriously. Really? When have I ever lied to you? Rong Xiu asked with a smile. Chu Luiyue sneered. You've lied to me many times. Rong Xiu was speechless. I forgot that he was a vengeful person. He leaned back and leaned against the head of the bed. His long legs were stretched out as he quietly stared at Chu Luiyue with his deep eyes that seemed to be able to swallow everything. The gentleness and affection in his eyes seemed to be able to drown her. He sighed softly. His voice was much softer, but it was also filled with unquestionable certainty. If lying to you can exchange for a lifetime of peace and happiness, then I'm willing to lie to you for a lifetime. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. This was the first time Rong Xiu said such words to her. It was so straightforward and honest. Strictly speaking, Rong Xiu wasn't lying but hiding. Every time she remembered something or discovered some truth, Rong Xiu wouldn't refute it. Instead, he would choose to admit it. It was like, in front of her eyes, there was a huge curtain that covered everything. Rong Xiu was standing behind the curtain. He didn't take the initiative to pull it away, but if she reached out, he wouldn't stop her. Chu Luiyue never understood why Rong Xiu did this. He knew a lot of things, but he refused to tell her everything. Chu Luiyue had many guesses in her heart, but she didn't expect to receive Rong Xiu's answer at such a time. She was silent for a moment, stared at Rong Xiu, and asked word by word. Rong Xiu, you don't want me to remember the past, right? Rong Xiu smiled but shook his head. His slender fingers rubbed her palm carefully, as if he was holding a rare treasure. It's just that there are some bad things, even if there was still their past in it. But as long as it was for her, nothing else mattered. Rong Xiu once thought that it wasn't a bad thing to let her never remember that part of her memory. But some things seem to have been decided long ago. Since you've returned to the academy, I won't force you to leave. Rong Xiu suddenly exerted force and pulled her into his embrace. Everything about you is ultimately up to you. Then I'll just stand by your side and accompany you. Rong Xiu's expression was very calm. In the dark night, the faint moonlight shone on his face, making him look like an immortal and a demon. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Something seemed to be surging in her chest, making her whole body heat up slightly. She suddenly leaned forward and bit his lower lip. Rong Xiu's breathing stagnated, and he immediately tightened his grip on her waist. The world spun, and Chu Luiyue was pressed against the soft mattress. She reached out and grabbed his shoulder, but he caught her with one hand. He easily and firmly held her two slender wrists above her head. Then he deliberately raised his head slightly, avoiding her lips, and moved closer to her neck. He bit her tender and white earlobe, as if to vent his anger. MMM. Chu Luiyue twisted her body uneasily and let out a low cry in her throat, but it was like a cat's meow, scratching people's ears and hearts. Rong Xiu's body instantly tensed up. He leaned closer to her and kissed her earlobe as if to comfort her, but his breath instantly became much hotter. The two of them were intimately entangled with each other, but they also seemed to want to take the opportunity to talk about something. Just as the air became hot and ambiguous, there was a sudden knock on the door. Knock knock. Then it was a familiar woman's voice. Chu Yu? Are you there? It was Luo Shishir. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses. Her originally hazy and moist eyes quickly became clear again. Right, they had previously agreed to go to Wine Mountain to celebrate tonight. However, when Rong Xiu came, she forgot about this matter. Chu Luiyue pushed the man in front of her. When Rong Xiu heard the commotion outside, he hesitated for a moment. But it was only for a moment. Then, as if he didn't notice at all, he hugged her even tighter and kissed her slowly. Chiyu? Luo Shishir called out strangely again. Why didn't anyone respond? Is he not here? This was Luo Yinming's voice. Of course not. We already agreed on this during the day. Luo Shishir said doubtfully. Chu Luiyue glared at Rong Xiu warningly. Rong Xiu chuckled silently. The light in the depths of his deep eyes flashed casually, but there was a subtle sense of danger. Appointment? Chapter 1140. This voice didn't come from Rong Xiu's mouth, but it still reached Chu Luiyue's ears clearly. It was low and hoarse, easily moving one's heart. Chu Luiyue was dazed for a moment, but she quickly reacted and narrowed her eyes dangerously. She didn't believe that Rong Xiu didn't know about this. It's just a trip to Thousand Wine Mountain. Thousand Wine Mountain? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. She didn't know what he was thinking, but there was an unfathomable smile in his eyes. It's indeed a good place. She had just returned to the academy, and she was going there. Chu Luiyue blinked. Why can't I go to Thousand Wine Mountain? Looking at the way Rong Xiu mentioned Thousand Wine Mountain, it didn't seem like a compliment. Of course not. Rong Xiu smiled and gently tapped her lips. Go early and come back early. Be obedient and don't cause any trouble. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She was just going to have fun with a few friends, not to fight or cause trouble. Rong Xiu's tone sounded like she was going to do something bad on purpose. Why is there no movement at all? Could it be that he's really not here? This was Zhuo Sheng's voice. Why don't we go somewhere else to look? It shouldn't be, since we've already agreed. Luo Shishir muttered. Let's go in and take a look. If there's no one, then we'll talk. Luo Yinming said, and was about to push the door open. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. The moment the door opened, Rong Xiu's figure disappeared from the room. Chu Yu. Seeing Chu Luiyue sitting cross-legged on the bed, Luo Yinming was stunned. Why didn't you answer when I called you outside? Chu Luiyue slowly heaved a sigh of relief and jumped down from the bed. It's nothing. I was thinking about a prescription and was a little absent-minded, so I didn't hear you. In the dark night, the light in the room was very dim. They couldn't clearly see Chu Luiyue's slightly red and swollen lips, as well as his watery and hazy eyes. Chu Luiyue smiled. Let's go. Thousand Wine Mountain. When they arrived, the moon was already high in the sky. The bright moonlight slanted down, casting a faint blue shadow on the forest. The night breeze blew gently, and the leaves rustled. Occasionally, one could hear various sounds. Chu Luiyue listened attentively, and realized that the noise seemed to be coming from the top of the mountain. Today is the beginning of the month. Many students will come here. Luo Shishir explained as if she had seen through Chu Luiyue's thoughts. We're already quite late. However, fourth brother has already helped us book a spot here, so we can just go there directly. Only then did Chu Luiyue realize that the 10,000 Wine Mountain was so particular. Isn't this place open to everyone? Why is it so troublesome? Chu Luiyue asked casually. Of course it's because of the spring. Zhuo Sheng, who was walking in front, suddenly turned around and chuckled. It seems like you really don't know. It's said that the spring water that gushes out from the spring is very beneficial to the cultivator's body. Sometimes, it can even help one break through the shackles and reach a higher level. Therefore, the closer to the spring, the more precious the spot is. Today is the beginning of the month, so there are the most people here. Of course, it's the hardest to get a spot. Chu Luyue nodded in understanding. He could roughly guess what was going on. Everyone had worked hard during the day. It was rare for them to have a place to relax, so they naturally wouldn't miss it. The new students who passed the assessment wanted to celebrate. The older students who made it onto the Azure Sky Roll also wanted to celebrate. Even those who were defeated couldn't help but have some thoughts of drowning their sorrows in alcohol. It wasn't surprising that this place would be so lively. Is the spring water really so magical? In comparison, Chu Luyue was more curious about this. She had seen a lot of heavenly treasures, but she had never heard of such an existence. The spring water that gushed out from the spring had such amazing effects. It made people curious. I've only heard about it. As for the specific effects, won't we naturally know when we get up there? Zhuosheng smiled indifferently. Obviously, he didn't care much about these rumors. What he cared about was whether they could have a good time tonight. Chu Luyue didn't ask any more questions and continued to walk up. The closer they got to the top of the mountain, the clearer the lively sounds became. It seemed to be mixed with the sound of a stream. Chu Luyue looked towards the source of the sound. Unfortunately, she couldn't see clearly in the dense forest. She could barely see what seemed to be a stream flowing down. The moonlight shone on it, making it sparkle. It didn't seem to be anything special. Zhuosheng, why are you only here now? A hearty young man's voice suddenly came from the top of the mountain. We all thought that you weren't planning to come. Immediately after, Chu Luyue saw a few people walking down from above. Zhuosheng laughed loudly. Haha, if we didn't come, wouldn't it be too boring? After listening to their conversation, Chu Luyue understood their identities. They were also students that the Xian masters had just recruited today. Only the person talking to Zhuosheng at the front was a senior brother, who had come to the academy about a year earlier than them. Coincidentally, he and Zhuosheng had known each other for a long time. Therefore, their relationship seemed to be very close. After that, Zhuosheng introduced them to each other. After hearing the name Chuyu, those people's gazes paused on Chu Luyue for a moment. However, most of their attention was still on Luo Shishir. Especially the young man who greeted Zhuosheng. He was very eager to Luo Shishir. Anyone could tell that he had feelings for Luo Shishir. From their words, it wasn't hard to tell that they knew each other. However, Luo Shishir didn't seem to be interested in him. She had always been reserved and polite, and didn't even say much. Just like that, the group of people went up the mountain together in a subtle atmosphere. Thousand Wine Mountain was actually a very tall and majestic mountain peak. The top of the mountain was vast, and could accommodate many people at the same time. Moreover, under the bright moonlight, the scenery was just right. Coupled with the rich and refreshing wine fragrance in the air, it was even more intoxicating. From afar, Chu Luyue could smell that strange fragrance. She sniffed lightly, and took a deep breath. She immediately felt as if her entire chest and abdomen were soaked in that intoxicating wine fragrance. However, this smell wouldn't really make people lose their minds. Therefore, the elders of the academy would turn a blind eye to the students relaxing on Thousand Wine Mountain on this day. After Chu Luyue reached the top of the mountain, she immediately saw the spring in the middle. Chapter 1141. Speaking of which, it was strange. This spring was growing at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. No one knew how the spring water gushed out. The size of the mouth of the spring was about the size of a normal well. The edge of the mouth of the spring was made of translucent white mountain rocks. It was unknown whether it was because of the spring water, or because the moonlight was too bright. But in any case, the mouth of the spring looked exceptionally clear and moist. From afar, there was still spring water gushing out of the spring. Then it flowed down, forming a stream that spread down from the mountain peak. There were many people standing around. Some of them directly filled their wine jugs or wine cups, drank it all in one gulp, or slowly tasted it. Everyone chatted with each other, and the atmosphere was very lively. Chu Luyue, and the others arrived at the location they had agreed on earlier. It was actually a boundary beside the stream. There was still a small distance between this place and the spring. Chu Luiyue scanned her surroundings and recognized the people standing closest to the spring. They seemed to be her senior brothers and senior sisters who were very strong. When the people beside them looked over, they were obviously envious. However, no one crossed the line. Obviously, everyone here was very obedient. I really don't know when we'll be able to stand closest to the spring. It was rare for Zhuosheng to lower his voice, his eyes filled with envy. I heard that the spring water that has just gushed out of the spring contains the purest energy. When it flows down, its effect will be greatly weakened. If we can stand there. Hey, who doesn't want to in the academy? But how can this be so easy? You have to know that the people standing there are all in the top 50 of the Azure Cloud Roll. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. Top 50, that was basically 40 or so. Otherwise they would directly say top 40, or even top 30 and so on. In the academy, this ranking could definitely be considered as one of the most outstanding. Of course, it could not be said to be the top. On the contrary, the most powerful ones would not appear in such a place. Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze and took a few steps closer to the stream to take a closer look. Standing here, he could indeed feel a subtle aura contained within. It was as if it was some kind of very special pure energy. Chu Luiyue was curious. It was said that this 1,000-wine mountain was just an ordinary mountain back then. On a certain day 1,000 years ago, for some unknown reason, there was a strange phenomenon in the world. Wind and thunder rumbled. After the chaos, such a wonderful thing had appeared on the 10,000-wine mountain. It had been a very long time since then. TSK, the wine of this myriad wine mountain is indeed good stuff. Zhuosheng could no longer hold back his curiosity and casually poured himself a cup. After drinking it, his eyes immediately lit up. You guys give it a try too. Luo Yinming and Gushuri also tried drinking a few mouthfuls. They were pleasantly surprised. It is indeed a good item. This seems to be even more fragrant than the 9-leaf green that we drank in the clam before. At this moment, Chu Luiyue felt a weight on his shoulder. She turned her head and saw that Dumpling had unknowingly appeared and was squatting on her shoulder. At this moment, its eyes were shining as it looked at the flowing spring water with a longing look. Chu Luiyue, you want it? Dumpling nodded frantically. Yes, I want to. This smell is simply too fragrant, all right? Chu Luiyue rarely saw it like this, so she could not help but laugh. She took out a cup, filled it to the brim, and handed it to it. Here for you. Dumpling poked its head in and drank a mouthful. Its eyes shone even more brightly. In a short while, Dumpling had finished all the spring water in the cup. It smacked its lips and looked at Chu Luiyue eagerly. Its eyes were full of emotions. You want more? Chu Luiyue glanced at its stomach suspiciously. Dumpling had not revealed its true body now. It was only the size of a palm. The cup just now could have contained it. She didn't know how it managed to drink so much spring water. Now it wanted more? Dumpling inched closer to her and pecked her on the cheek. Then, it used its furry little head to rub against her face. Its lackey nature was completely exposed. Chu Luiyue. Chuyu, is this your contracted magical beast? Luo Shishir asked in surprise. Chu Luiyue nodded. Hiss, this seems to be a red-tailed phoenix. Luo Yinming, who was standing at the side, could not hide her surprise. This was a divine beast. Moreover, it was a divine beast with an extremely strong bloodline power. Even they might not be able to contract such a divine beast. Luo Shishir also widened her eyes slightly. She knew that Chuyu had a divine beast contract. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to ask for the refiner's test during the day. However, she did not expect Chuyu's divine beast to be such a powerful existence. I really couldn't tell. Chuyu, how old are you? You actually have such a divine beast contract. Zhuosheng glanced at it and was also shocked. Aren't you a celestial physician? How can you contract such a powerful divine beast? They all knew that Chuyu's realm as a warrior was only at the early stage of the 7th stage. According to his talent and strength, there should be no reason for him to be able to subdue such an arrogant divine beast. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. I'm just lucky. But isn't this too good? Zhuosheng could not help but murmur as he looked at Chu Luiyue with a strange gaze. Where did you come from? According to such a family background, he should be a disciple of a first-class family, right? Chu Luiyue smiled but did not say anything. He had no intention of revealing his identity. Luo Shishir and the others did not care. In Lingxiao College, students could come from any place or force on the continent. For various reasons, many people were not willing to completely expose their origins. In addition, in the college, there was the guidance and supervision of the dean and elders. Everyone's focus would be on cultivation, and not other aspects. Therefore, when a person did not want to reveal his background and origin, others would tactfully not ask anymore. In any case, in the college, these were all secondary. As long as you were outstanding enough, you did not need to care about anything else. Chu Luiyue teased Dumpling. If you want more, you can drink it yourself. In any case, they were standing by the stream. Dumpling only needed to fly down. However, Dumpling shook its head and looked in a certain direction with bright eyes full of eagerness. Chu Luiyue followed its gaze, and the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. You don't tell me you want to go to the spring to drink it? Dumpling flapped its wings. Yes, it's there. Chu Luiyue. She grabbed Dumpling's wings and lifted it up, looking straight into its eyes. Tuanzi, do you have any misunderstandings about yourself or about your master? She did not even have the qualifications to go there. But it was interested? Dumpling looked at her eagerly. Let it go. The legendary three-eyed eagle's cold and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 1142. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Although it broke through the shackles and became a red-tailed phoenix, there's still a large part of its bloodline power that hasn't been activated. This is a good opportunity, the legendary three-eyed eagle said. Otherwise, who knows how long it'll take to activate its bloodline power just by relying on your breakthrough. My breakthrough? Chu Luiyue was confused. That's right. It wasn't born a red-tailed phoenix. Without the guidance of its race, the bloodline power in its body can't be fully unleashed. Only when you become a god-level powerhouse can its potential be fully unleashed. Note that it's a supreme god, not a demigod. The legendary three-eyed eagle's voice was cold and straightforward, almost unreasonable. If you want to reach this step now, it'll take a long time. Chu Luiyue. It was full of truth, and she couldn't even refute it. In that case, the spring water coming out of the spring on the top of the mountain has such an effect on Dumpling? Yes. The legendary three-eyed eagle gave a simple sound of acknowledgement. Of course, if you don't want to, just stop it and wait in the future. Chu Luiyue. At this point, wasn't it a little redundant to add this sentence? The legendary three-eyed eagle was arrogant and cold. For it to open its mouth like this, it was definitely not a small matter. She really didn't know that Dumpling had such a problem before. She looked at Dumpling calmly. Those bright and beautiful eyes were looking at her with incomparable desire. Chu Luiyue paused. All right, I'll take you there. Dumpling's eyes were bright, and it was about to kiss her intimately. Chu Luiyue pressed down on its little wings and looked at Zhuosheng beside her. Is there any way to go to the spring? Zhuosheng reacted for a moment, and then understood Chu Luiyue's meaning. He looked at her with a strange expression. You really want to go there? Don't do it. Didn't I just say that it's their territory? We can't go there. I just want to ask for some spring water. Besides, the Myriad Wine Mountain is the Academy's territory. When did it become theirs? Chu Luiyue interrupted him with a faint smile. If someone stronger came, I'm afraid they would have to obediently give up their positions, right? Sure, you can't say such things. The young man who was in charge of welcoming them suddenly spoke. He first glanced at the mouth of the spring to make sure that those people hadn't heard Chu Luiyue's words. Then he slowly let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a frown that was both complaining and warning. You're new here and don't know the rules. It's fine if it's your first time, but don't ever say it again in the future. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, even I won't be able to protect you. Chu Luiyue's gaze lightly swept across him. Yes, the middle stage of the 9th stage indeed did not have much ability. Not to mention protecting them, He might not even be able to protect himself. There should be other ways, right? Luo Shishir suddenly spoke and looked at the young man with an inquiring expression. Senior brother Fan? A troubled expression appeared on Fan's face. It was rare for Luo Shishir to take the initiative to talk to him. But it was for that Chuyu. He felt very uncomfortable in his heart. And when he looked at Chu Luyue, he became more and more unpleasant to the eye. Of course, there's nothing absolute. If you really want to go, there are actually two ways. First, use points to exchange with them. Usually it's at least 50,000 points. Second, ask a middleman to introduce you. As long as this person's identity is high enough, the other party will naturally give face. He glanced at Chu Luyue, and a hint of ridicule appeared at the corner of his eyes. Junior brother Chuyu, you can choose one of them. As soon as he finished speaking, the few of them fell silent for a moment. These two methods didn't seem to have any problems at first, but in reality, the difficulty of executing them was very high. On one hand, they had just arrived at the academy and couldn't take out so many points. On the other hand, even if they did, very few people would be willing to exchange them for this. As for the second method, they had just arrived, so how could they know anyone? If fourth brother is willing to step in, Luo Yinming muttered softly. Luo Yinlin was also on the Azure Cloud roll, and his ranking was quite high, so these people should give face. But tonight, Luo Yinlin didn't come with them at all. This greatly increased the difficulty of making peace. Why don't I go and talk to them? For fourth brother's sake. Luo Shishir had just opened her mouth when she was rejected by Fan. It's useless for you to go. They only recognize opponents with similar strength. Even if your senior brother Luo Yinlin's sister, they won't give any face. If one or two of them brought their families, wouldn't it be a mess? There was only hope for this matter if Luo Yinlin came personally. Then isn't this matter still hopeless? Zhuosheng used her elbow to poke Chu Luyue. Hey, Chuyu, why are you so persistent about going there? Our current position is already pretty good. Why do you have to find so much trouble for yourself? Luo Shishir glanced at her and pursed her lips. Why don't we ask fourth brother for help next time? Since they were all family, fourth brother shouldn't refuse. Chu Luyue didn't say anything. Dumpling lay pitifully on her shoulder, the light in its eyes gradually dimming. How long will it take for Dumpling's bloodline to fully awaken? Chu Luyue asked in her heart. After a pause, the legendary three-eyed eagle said, At least stay at the spring for a month. Chu Luyue rubbed her temples with a headache. If it was a day or two, she could still get Luo Yinlin to help. At most, she would owe him a few favors. But this month, it was very difficult. Dumpling leaned on her shoulder listlessly. Actually, if it didn't work, it wouldn't go. Anyway, the bloodline power was here, so it could be slowly activated. Chu Luyue tapped its head. If she used points to exchange, she would probably use them much faster than she earned them. Moreover, points were very precious in the academy. If she used them all for this, it wouldn't be worth it. If she could get on the Azure Cloud ranking and rely on her own strength to occupy a place. Chu Luyue thought about it seriously and felt that she wouldn't be able to get into the top 50 in a short period of time. So she might as well give up. From the looks of it, there seemed to be no other way. She couldn't let Rong Xiu personally do it. Chu Luyue pondered in her heart. Sigh, Chuyu, if you ask me, don't even think about it. The spring water of Thousand Wine Mountain is very beneficial for cultivation. But in the end, if you want to become stronger, you still have to work hard. Zhuosheng advised casually. Chu Luyue looked up and chuckled. You're right. Luo Shishir also comforted her. That's right. According to your talent, it's only a matter of time before you get on the Azure Cloud ranking. When you're strong enough, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to come here? Her voice was very gentle. Fan watched from the side. Suddenly he frowned and said, What's wrong? Actually, there's another way. Chapter 1143. Chu Luyue raised her eyes and glanced at him. Fan held the wine cup in his hand. His face was slightly red, and his lips and teeth were filled with the smell of alcohol. If they didn't know that the spring water wouldn't intoxicate people, they would have thought that he was drunk. His hand moved and pointed in another direction. His eyes seemed to flash with a mysterious and strange light. Everyone comes to Thousand Wine Mountain from evening to early morning. Other than that, there's no one here. If you really want to. Fan, what are you talking about? Luo Shishir interrupted him with some dissatisfaction, and frowned slightly. You know that during the day, no one is allowed to enter Thousand Wine Mountain without permission. Aren't you deliberately letting Chuyu make a mistake? I only opened my mouth because I saw that he really wanted to go to the spring. Fan burped. The strong smell of alcohol was almost suffocating. He stared at Chu Luiyue as if he was smiling, but there was no smile in his eyes. Junior brother Chuyu, what do you think? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Was Fan venting his anger on her because of Luo Shishir? This was really an unexpected disaster. Originally, Chu Luiyue wanted to give him some face, but this person was narrow-minded, and there was really no need to continue interacting with him. She took half a step back, stroked Tuanzi to comfort her, and said lightly, "Thank you for your good intentions, senior brother Fan. However, I have my own plans, so I won't trouble you." Fan sneered. Pretentious. He didn't believe that this Chuyu really had such guts. He chuckled. Junior brother Chuyu, you just came to the academy, so there are many things that you don't understand. As your senior brother, it's inevitable that I have to remind you. It's good to have ideas, but if you want things that don't belong to you, you'll only cause trouble for yourself. The warning in his words was very strong. Luo Yinming and the others sensed that something was wrong, and their expressions changed slightly. Luo Shishir frowned even more. However, Chu Luiyue only smiled indifferently. Thank you for your advice, senior brother. However, my luck has always been very good. Fan looked at her with a heavy gaze. Chu Luiyue had already turned his gaze to the spring at the top of the mountain. Actually, Fan's words had indeed reminded her. The opening time of Myriad Wine Mountain was very strange, but perhaps because it had always been like this, everyone was used to it. During the day, what kind of secret was hidden in the 10,000 Wine Mountain? Whoosh! At this moment, the sound of wings flapping could be heard. When Chu Luiyue heard this, he looked up. The next moment, a red figure suddenly flew down from the top of the mountain. Haha! Atong, what's wrong with that little thing of yours? At the same time, a hearty laughter came from the top of the mountain. The other woman replied sweetly, Bah! You're the crazy one. This is a divine beast with the bloodline of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Perhaps after drinking this spring water, his strength has increased again. As he spoke, the red figure had already flown down from above. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Only then did he see the red flames burning around the magical beast. Wherever it passed, the branches and leaves would burn, and the mountain rocks would be charred black. This was enough to show its power. When it passed through the noisy crowd, it attracted waves of exclamations. In order to avoid this magical beast, the crowd retreated one after another. The originally lively mountain peak was instantly in chaos. Chu Luiyue didn't want to get involved in this trouble, so he took a few steps back, wanting to avoid it. Unexpectedly, the magical beast suddenly turned around halfway and headed straight for Chu Luiyue. When the blazing temperature swept over, Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. This thing swoosh. Dumpling suddenly became energetic. It flapped its wings and was about to rush out. Chu Luiyue stopped it and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the magical beast that was rushing over was very familiar. She tilted her head and glanced at Dumpling. The same figure, the same flames. It seemed to be a red-tailed phoenix. Chi! The red-tailed phoenix opposite her stared intently at Dumpling, and the flames on its body burned even more fiercely. Immediately, its speed suddenly increased, and it headed straight for Dumpling. This was an attack. Chu Luiyue immediately understood something, and her expression turned cold. Tuanzi's eyes were suddenly burning with a crazy desire to fight. However, Chu Luiyue still suppressed it and retreated at the same time. Cha! A ball of fire flew out. It brushed past Chu Luiyue's ear. A few scattered strands of hair were burned, and a faint smell spread out, causing Chu Luiyue to feel a sense of frustration. Chuyu, are you okay? Luo Shishir and the others hurriedly asked. That move just now was really too thrilling. If there was a slight deviation then, I'm fine. Chu Liyue's expression was indifferent as she looked ahead coldly. Opposite her, the red-tailed phoenix was staring at Dumpling on her shoulder with a provocative gaze. They were both red-tailed phoenixes. Logically speaking, since the two of them were of the same race, they should be closer. However, in reality, the red-tailed phoenix race was inherently competitive. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were aggressive. Once they met, there had to be a victor. Therefore, this red-tailed phoenix suddenly rushed over. Its goal was to compete with Dumpling. This was the rule of their race. Originally, others could not say anything. However, such a rash sneak attack was meaningless. Ha! I was wondering what was wrong with this little thing. So there's another red-tailed phoenix here. Chu Liyue looked over in the direction of the voice. A well-built young man was standing at the top of the mountain, looking down at this scene. Beside him stood a young woman with a curvaceous figure. She was gorgeous and her red hair was very flamboyant. At this moment, she also saw Chu Liyue standing below, as well as Dumpling on her shoulder. Her originally smiling face turned slightly cold as she raised her eyebrows. Really? The academy is indeed full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. They even bump into divine beasts. How interesting. Everyone could hear the displeasure in her words. Atong, I think the color of her red-tailed phoenix seems to be richer and purer than yours. The young man laughed as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. If we really fight, I think you're going to lose. The red-haired woman frowned and sized up Chu Liyue. Newcomer. Another man beside her suddenly said, isn't that the disciple that Elder One Zheng just accepted today? I think his name is Chu Yu? Chu Liyue could clearly see that after hearing this, the red-haired woman's expression became even worse. So it's such a powerful junior brother. To be able to catch Elder One Zheng's eye, he must be very outstanding in all aspects, right? The young man who spoke at the beginning laughed maliciously. Atong, didn't you want to go to Elder One Zheng's side back then? But you were eliminated in the end? The red-haired woman glared at him, then looked at Chu Liyue and said like in order. You come here. Digression la 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 la. Chapter 1144. With a delicate rebuke, the surrounding people quieted down and looked at Chu Liyue with different expressions. Chu Liyue paused for a moment and walked forward. Chu Yu. Luo Shirshir came up to stop her with a worried expression. Why don't we go with you? Shirshir, do you know who that woman is? Yin Fan sneered with a warning look in his eyes. That's Lu Yintong, who's ranked 49th on the Celestial Physician list. At the same time, she's also ranked 46th on the warrior list. She's not someone to be trifled with. And the man who spoke first, Gong Sheng, was ranked 39th on the warrior list. The others were not weak either. They were not ordinary people. We can't afford to provoke them. This ranking, in the Spirit Firmament Academy, was absolutely outstanding. One had to know that the entire college recruited geniuses from all over the world. It was already impressive enough to be able to enter Lingxiao College. Not to mention that these people had already made a name for themselves in the college. But, senior brother Luo Yinlin's ranking is higher than theirs. But you have to know that in the college, there are some things that can only be solved by yourself. As Yin Fan spoke, he looked at Chu Liyue meaningfully. Luo Shirshir wanted to say something more, but Chu Liyue gave her a reassuring look and chuckled. Don't worry, I know what to do. With that, she took a step forward and went up. Many people looked over. For a moment, the top of the mountain was exceptionally quiet. Little Phoenix, come back. Lu Yintong shouted at the red-tailed phoenix. With a piercing sound, the red figure quickly drew an arc in the air. The red-tailed phoenix had already returned to Lu Yintong's side, and the flames on its body had quietly dissipated. Chu Liyue walked over and stopped 5 steps away from the few of them. The two sides faced each other and fell into a subtle atmosphere. Lu Yintong's gaze first swept over Dumpling. At this moment, both sides were facing each other and were very close to each other. Naturally, they could see each other's situation more clearly. Everyone, including Lu Yintong, saw Dumpling nestled on Chu Liyue's shoulder. The blazing red color on its body was indeed pure and rich. It was clearly much better than Lu Yintong's. This also proved that the bloodline power in its body was purer and denser. Lu Yintang frowned. Ever since she contracted this red-tailed phoenix, she had always been very proud of it. After all, not everyone had such good luck. Who knew that this kind of new student who had just arrived at the academy, who looked ordinary, actually also had a red-tailed red phoenix? And it was even better than hers. It would be a miracle if Lu Yintang felt good about it. Chu Yu greets senior brothers and sisters. Chu Luyue was the first to speak and politely greeted them. However, his attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, and he didn't seem to be nervous. So you're Chu Yu? Lu Yintang looked at Chu Luyue with an unbridled and picky gaze, as if she was looking at a cheap object. Chu Luyue pretended not to see her gaze, and his expression was still calm and composed. I'm new here. Senior brothers and sisters, please give me your guidance. Ha! You're a talkative kid. Gong Sheng, who was at the side, clapped his hands and smiled happily. Your red-tailed phoenix is quite interesting. Atong is always showing off her phoenix. Today another one has finally arrived. Why don't we let them compete? Chu Luyue's expression changed slightly. Senior brothers and sisters are all giants among men. I don't dare to be presumptuous. You don't want to compete? Gong Sheng's words were very straightforward, and many times, they even sounded a little harsh. TSK, Atong, even junior brother doesn't want to compete with you. Chu Luyue glanced at Gong Sheng. His words were obviously intentional. As expected, Lu Yintang's expression turned even colder. Her eyes were fixed on Chu Luyue. Why? Do you think your divine beast will win? So you can't be bothered to compete with me? Chu Luyue. Was there something wrong with their brains? However, she didn't say this in public. She even concealed her expression very well. Senior brothers and sisters, you've misunderstood. You're all powerful figures on the Azure Cloud role. I've just arrived at the academy, and I'm still far from senior sister in all aspects. I don't dare to compare myself to senior sister. If you don't agree now, you'll be ignorant. Lu Yintang interrupted Chu Luyue impatiently. You must know the rules of the red-tailed phoenix clan. Since that's the case, why don't we just let them fight and determine the winner? She was already giving the other party enough face by taking the initiative to invite him. If he dared to refuse in public, Chu Luyue sensed the faint cold air. She blinked her eyes. Since senior brothers and sisters insist, then it's better to comply. But what? Don't dilly-dally. Lu Yintang seemed to be very impatient. Hey, wait. Gong Sheng suddenly interrupted and looked at the two of them with a smile. Tong, if it's just a simple competition, how boring would that be? Do you think we should bet on something? What are you up to now? Lu Yintang looked at him with disdain. Gong Sheng didn't seem to care about her gaze at all. He continued to smile. Look, your red-tailed phoenix's bloodline power is obviously weaker than junior brother Chu Yu's. However, you're stronger than him. The power your divine beast can unleash is naturally stronger than his. So in short, the two of you have your own strengths. It's really hard to say who will win this round. In my opinion, why don't we bet with 3 drops of divine beast blood? Whoever loses will take out 3 drops of divine beast blood and give it to the other party. The surrounding people instantly fell silent. Regardless of whether they had divine beasts or not, they knew what these 3 drops of divine beast blood meant. There was a limit to the amount of divine beast bloodline power in each divine beast's body. Giving away 3 droplets was no different from giving away the power of his bloodline to the other party for free. If it were any other competition, it would be meaningless to compete like this. However, these two are red-tailed phoenixes. Gong Sheng's eyes flickered with excitement. They were of the same race, which meant that they could devour each other's bloodline power. Lu Yintang had an idea. At first, she didn't think of it, but after hearing Gong Sheng's words, she was a little tempted. If she could snatch the other party's bloodline power and integrate it into her contracted divine beast's body, then her divine beast would definitely be able to surpass it. Okay, it's decided. She looked at Chu Luyue. Chu Yu, do you agree? Although it was a question, it wasn't an inquiry tone. Obviously, they wouldn't allow Chu Luyue to refuse. Chu Luyue narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the spring that was gurgling beside him. He suddenly smiled. Okay. However, I have a request. I want to increase the bet. Chapter 1145. When everyone heard this, they were all stunned. Raise the bet. Lu Yintang looked at her suspiciously. How do you want to raise the bet? Chu Luiyue raised her hand and pointed at the spring. If I win, other than the 3 drops of divine beast blood, I also want to stay in the spring for a month. I believe this isn't difficult for senior sister Lu, right? Lu Yintang didn't expect Chu Luiyue's request to be this. She frowned. After realizing what she said, she felt conflicted, because this was actually quite troublesome for her. One had to know that even if her ranking on the Azure Cloud roll was not bad, there were many other people who were also good. Occasionally, they would want to come to Thousand Wine Mountain to fight for a spot. After all, the spring was only so big, and there were only a few spots next to it. It wouldn't be a problem for one to occupy the best spot for a day or two. Everyone could take turns. But if one wanted to occupy it for a month, that would be too much. Even she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to do this for an entire month. But now, Chu Yu was actually using this as a bet. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up into a light smile as she looked at her. She was neither arrogant nor rash, and she was calm and collected. It was as if he didn't think that the bet he just proposed was that shocking. Ha ha ha. Junior brother Chu Yu is really straightforward. Gong Sheng was full of energy when he heard this, and hurriedly urged Lu Yintang to agree. Ah Tong, junior brother has already taken the initiative. Don't you dare to agree? These words provoked Lu Yintang. She glared at him. You're the one who doesn't dare. Do you think I'll lose? No one thought that she would lose. Although everyone could see that her contracted divine beast's bloodline was slightly inferior to the other parties, she was still a powerhouse on the Azure Cloud roll. And the combat strength of her divine beast couldn't be underestimated. And the other party was just a junior brother, who had just entered the academy. Moreover, he specialized in celestial physician, and his cultivation as a mystic master seemed to be only at the early stage of rank 7? There was even less to worry about. I agree to your bet. Lu Yintang looked straight at Chu Luiyue, her eyes still high and mighty. However, if you lose, what punishment will there be? Chu Luiyue shrugged and chuckled. Senior sister Lu, you can do whatever you want with me. It's a deal. Lu Yintang gave the red-tailed phoenix a look. Whoosh! It spread its wings, and the blazing flames rose again. The surrounding air seemed to be burning up. The people who were standing closer to them, unconsciously, took a few steps back. Who didn't know that this thing's battle prowess was astonishing, and it had the same fiery temper as its master. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause one to be implicated. At the top of the mountain, with Chu Luiyue and Lu Yintang as the center, an empty space quickly appeared. The people below had already surrounded them. Although they didn't dare to get too close, their eyes were fixed on the 2 people who were confronting each other. Chu Luiyue nodded on Dumpling's head and lowered his voice. I've already fought for an opportunity for you. Whether you can seize it or not is up to you. Dumpling nodded her head vigorously and flew out quickly. Whoosh! The flames around its body also began to burn fiercely. The difference between it and the other one was that the flames on its body were obviously more intense and crimson, and the pressure contained within it was obviously even stronger than before. The comparison between the 2 sides was obvious. Lu Yintang was even more unhappy. But when she thought about how she would be able to obtain the bloodline power of the other party's divine beast after this competition, her gloomy expression changed. She glanced at Chu Luiyue, who was not far away, and saw that her face was still calm. She frowned and looked away. Children who had just entered the academy always thought that they were the most outstanding geniuses in the world. If they didn't learn their lesson, they wouldn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Why would Chu Yu agree to such a bet? Luo Shirsher couldn't help but murmur worriedly. He won't have any chance of winning this round. There's nothing he can do even if he doesn't agree. Based on the situation just now, no matter what he says, there's no other way for him to go. Luo Yanming patted her shoulder comfortingly. Let's watch first. If he really needs help, we'll ask fourth brother for help. Luo Shirsher could only nod her head. Although they hadn't been in the academy for long, there were some rules that they knew long ago. For example, outsiders couldn't easily interfere in such a battle. In the academy, the strong were respected. If a person only knew how to rely on others, and repeatedly let others support him, then he would only be looked down upon by others. Therefore, Chuyu had to deal with this battle by himself. Don't worry, the bloodline power of his divine beast doesn't seem to be weak. Maybe there's still a chance of winning. Zhuosheng scratched his head. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Luo Shishir smiled bitterly. He might as well not have said that. They were both red-tailed phoenixes. Even if their bloodline power was different, how big of a difference could there be? However, there was a huge chasm between Chuyu and Lu Yintong. His defeat in this round was almost certain. Yet he added such a bet in the end. I really don't know what he's thinking. You overestimate yourself. Since you dare to do this, you have to be prepared to pay the price. Yin Fan sneered. Soon, he will know that this is Lingxiao College, not a place where anyone can behave atrociously. The night was dark, and the moonlight was bright. On the top of the mountain, two red-tailed phoenixes faced each other from afar. Dumpling stared at the one in front of her, and narrowed her eyes dangerously. Relying on its master's power, it tried to challenge it. It was really tired of living. Its wings flapped, and in the next moment, it disappeared on the spot. The crowd cried out in alarm. It was Chuyu's demonic beast that attacked first. This demonic beast really took after its master's personality. It was very bold. Bang! The sound of a violent collision was heard. The two balls of flames collided fiercely. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. The two figures were instantly entangled. Because they were of the same race, they were extremely similar. In addition, both of them had flames burning on their bodies. As they fought, they completely turned into a ball of fire, and everyone couldn't see clearly. From afar, they could only see a ball of flames that kept bursting with sparks. There was occasionally a blazing and terrifying fluctuation on it that spread out to the surroundings. Bang! Bang! Chi! All sorts of sounds of collision and falling could be heard. After a while, the two finally separated. A few feathers fell from Dumpling's body, and her entire body looked much more messy. As for the other one of its claws was bleeding, and its body was also stained with a few drops of blood. It looked even more miserable. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. Lu Yintong was originally confident of victory, but when she saw this scene, her expression changed slightly. Little Phoenix! She let out a clear shout. Defeat it! She had to win this battle. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone saw the flames on the red-tailed phoenix suddenly rise. Boom! A huge figure appeared in midair, casting a thick shadow. Blazing! Pressure! That red-tailed phoenix had transformed into its true body. It glanced coldly at Dumpling, and immediately leaned over. Its sharp beak seemed to want to kill. Chapter 1146. Almost at the same time, Dumpling's figure also underwent a huge change. An even hotter flame suddenly started burning. However, in comparison, Dumpling seemed to be smaller than the other party. Lu Yintong could not help but sneer when she saw this scene. A confident expression appeared on her face. The power that a contracted divine beast could unleash was closely related to its master's realm and strength. No matter how pure this red-tailed phoenix's bloodline was, it could not change the fact that its master was only a rank 7 warrior. The gap between them could not be made up for. It's time to end this. With Lu Yintong's order, the red-tailed phoenix charged towards Dumpling. Its size had an obvious advantage. An astonishing pressure came crashing down on him. Dumpling flapped its wings, and was about to fly up when it realized that the surrounding space had suddenly become very strange. Everything around it suddenly became heavy. It was as if it had fallen into a swamp, and even struggling became extremely difficult. Divine Realm. A cry of surprise came from the crowd. It was different from the human race, who needed to cultivate bitterly and reach the high god realm before they could completely establish their own divine realm. Divine beasts had this talent from the moment they were born. As long as they reached adulthood, they would be able to unleash their own divine realm. At this moment, The red-tailed phoenix had clearly used this killing move. I heard that if the master of a contracted divine beast is not strong enough, it will implicate the divine beast and prevent it from unleashing all of its bloodline power. It seems that it's true. Chu Yu's red-tailed phoenix doesn't seem to have reached adulthood yet. This match is bound to be lost. Lu Yintang is already a demigod. Although the power that her contracted divine beast can unleash is limited, it should be more than enough to deal with Chu Yu, right? The crowd was in an uproar. They had already determined the outcome of this match. At this moment, the red-tailed phoenix's extremely sharp claws reached for Dumpling's eyes. It was as if it was going to dig out her eyeballs in the next moment. Dumpling's eyes burned with anger. Damn it. If I don't let you know how powerful I am, do you really think you can fly to the sky? Boom. In the next instant, under everyone's shocked gazes, a terrifying fluctuation suddenly erupted from Dumpling's body. Crack. In the void there seemed to be something shattering. A trace of surprise flashed through the red-tailed phoenix's eyes. But very quickly, that surprise turned into fear and panic. Almost without thinking, it retreated in a flash. Little Feng. Lu Yintang was astounded seeing this. Wasn't everything fine just now? How did it become like this in the blink of an eye? She could even clearly feel the fear in its heart. Soon Lu Yintang found out why it had such a reaction. Bang bang bang. A series of crisp sounds rang out. The divine domain that the red-tailed red phoenix had displayed earlier was actually collapsing inch by inch along with the void. Numerous black spatial cracks stretched across the sky. Looking from afar, it was like the cracked earth, causing one's heart to palpitate. An even stronger pressure seemed to have cut through all obstacles, pressing forward with an indomitable will. Lu Yintang suddenly widened her eyes. Gong Sheng's expression also changed. He unconsciously put down his arms that were originally crossed and looked at everything that was happening in front of him in shock and speechlessness. He almost thought that he had seen wrongly. The others' reactions were not any better. And all of this was only because Dumpling had also displayed her own divine domain. Although the range was very small, everywhere it passed, it easily crushed Lu Yintang's red-tailed phoenix. How is this possible? Gong Sheng sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered softly. Chu Yu is just a mere rank 7 warrior. How can his contracted divine beast display a divine domain? No one answered his question. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Seeing that the red-tailed phoenix was about to escape, Dumpling's eyes flashed with an extremely bright cold light. It quickly chased forward. At this moment, the nearby space had already been enveloped by Dumpling's divine domain. Therefore, its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed behind the red-tailed phoenix. The red-tailed phoenix seemed to have sensed something and turned around. A rare trace of shock and fear appeared in its arrogant eyes. Dumpling glanced at it. Screech! A clear cry suddenly spread out and lingered in the sky above Thousand Wine Mountain for a long time. Everyone's hearts trembled. It was as if a heavy rock had fallen from above and smashed down heavily. In an instant, it made it difficult for people to move. It was as if even the blood in their bodies had solidified. This is the pressure of the red-tailed phoenix. Amidst the deathly silence, someone muttered in a low voice. His voice was soft, but it was filled with shock. This is a divine beast that truly possesses the bloodline of the crimson gold celestial phoenix. In the next moment, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, Dumpling charged forward. The red-tailed phoenix dodged subconsciously. Swish! There was a huge wound on its wing. Feathers fluttered down, and it was covered in blood. White bones could even be seen at the wound. Many people sucked in a cold breath. She had only used one claw, but she had torn half of its wings. What kind of shocking combat strength was this? Even Lu Yintang was speechless as she looked at the scene in the sky. It was also a red-tailed red phoenix. In fact, her one was already an adult. It was bigger and seemed to be stronger. She thought that victory would be easy, but who knew? Little Phoenix. Lu Yintang suddenly came back to her senses and said sharply, "What are you doing? Defeat it. If it lost. When the red-tailed phoenix heard the order, a trace of struggle flashed in its eyes. However, before it was fully prepared, Dumpling's claw had already slapped down. Who asked you to be arrogant? Who asked you to be arrogant? What a shameful thing with such a weak bloodline. How dare you dream of defeating me? Crack! Crack! The sound of feathers being pulled out, flesh being torn, and bones being broken was mixed together, making one's teeth ache. Blood splattered everywhere. Many people's hair stood on end. If this continued, that red-tailed red phoenix would probably be crippled. Lu Yintang also realized this. She was shocked and angry. She never thought that her contracted divine beast, which she had always regarded as a treasure, would be beaten up like this one day. Stop. Her body was trembling slightly, and her eyes were red. At this moment, even if she didn't want to admit it, she knew that the outcome was already decided. Her contracted divine beast was indeed no match for the other party. It had even become meat on the chopping board, at the mercy of the other party. Dumpling didn't seem to hear her. It continued to leave all kinds of wounds on the red-tailed phoenix's body. Lu Yintang suddenly looked at Chu Luyue and shouted sternly, "Why don't you ask it to stop?" Chu Luyue said slowly. However, he didn't ask Dumpling to stop as she asked. She looked at Lu Yintang. "Senior Sister Lu, are you admitting defeat?" Chapter 1147. Lu Yintang was about to go crazy. How could he still be thinking about that at a time like this? "I said order it to stop immediately. Can't you hear me?" Lu Yintang raised her voice again. It was very ear-piercing. Chu Luyue looked apologetic. "Senior Sister Lu, this is a competition between them after all. Outsiders can't interfere. Also, Dumpling has always been hot-tempered. Even I can't persuade it. If this battle doesn't end, I think it won't listen to you." Whether it was because they couldn't persuade him or not, everyone was well aware of it. He was forcing Lu Yintang to admit defeat. How could Lu Yintang not see it? Therefore, she was so angry that her whole body trembled. Her eyes seemed to be on fire as she stared at Chu Luyue. "Chu Yu, how dare you?" Chu Luyue pretended not to understand the warning in her words. His expression was indifferent, and he didn't respond. Dumpling, on the other hand, seemed to be having a lot of fun. It didn't even look over. Its claws danced wildly, almost plucking all the feathers on the red-tailed phoenix's body. How could the red-tailed phoenix endure such humiliation? However, it was now covered in injuries, and was no match for Dumpling. It was dying and didn't even have the strength to resist. It could only tilt its head, and let Dumpling torture it. This scene was really strange. Lu Yintang suddenly sneered and turned around. "Fine. Since you don't want to stop, then, I'll take care of that thing myself. Senior Sister Lu, if you go on stage, it will be considered as admitting defeat." Chu Luyue kindly reminded her. Lu Yintang stopped in her tracks. A gust of cold air descended, and the air seemed to freeze inch by inch. Dead silence. Everyone looked at Chu Luyue, as if they were looking at a lunatic. Where did this kid get the courage to challenge Lu Yintang like this? "Ha!" Lu Yintang sneered. Her voice seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. "You win this round. Tell your beast to stop immediately." Chu Luyue slightly raised his chin. His originally calm face was instantly covered with a thin layer of frost, and the cold air was threatening. "Senior Sister Lu, please take back the second half of your sentence. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that your animal won't be able to return alive today." She spoke very slowly, so everyone could hear every word clearly. The young man's face still carried a bit of immaturity, but every word he spoke was resolute and decisive, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 caddies. Lu Yintang originally wanted to retort, but when she met that pair of bottomless, dark and unfathomable eyes, she suddenly shivered. Her heart inexplicably trembled, and she swallowed back the sarcastic words in her throat. After pausing for a moment, she turned her head and spoke in a stiff tone. "I admit defeat, that's all." This was the biggest concession Lu Yintang could make. Of course, it would be more appropriate to say that he had compromised or lowered his head. The expressions of Gong Sheng and the others were speechless. They were very familiar with Lu Yintang, and naturally knew how humiliating it was for her to say such words to a junior brother, who had just entered the academy. However, in the current situation, what else could she do? Her contracted divine beast was about to be killed by him. How could she care about anything else? Dumpling. Chu Liyue finally spoke. Come back. Only then did Dumpling throw down the half-dead red-tailed phoenix. Then, she flew down and stomped on its face with her claws. Bah! Who asked you to covet the power of my bloodline? The thing's head tilted, and it finally fainted completely. Lu Yintong's face was ashen. Her gaze at Dumpling was as sharp as a steel blade. Tuanzi seemed to be unaware of it. It flew to the spring and drank a lot of water. A warm force instantly spread throughout her body. Dumpling's eyes lit up. It wanted to continue, but Chu Liyue was still waiting for it. It could only reluctantly fly back. Transforming back to the size of a palm, Dumpling landed safely on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Although its body was also stained with traces of blood, it did not suffer any serious injuries. Chu Liyue's heart only relaxed after she checked it. Lu Yintong walked over with a livid expression and saw that her contracted divine beast was seriously injured and unconscious. From the horrifying wounds on its body, it could be seen that the other party had been ruthless in the battle just now. Hateful, useless thing. Lu Yintong cursed in her heart. Her expression was ugly. This time, it would take at least 10 days to half a month to recover from the serious injuries. She did not know if it would affect her ranking on the Green Cloud roll next month. One had to know that a large part of the reason why she could be ranked in the top 50 of the warrior roll was that she had such a powerful divine beast. But now, just as Lu Yintong was about to call it back, a clear voice suddenly came from behind her. Senior Sister Lu, you seem to have forgotten something. Lu Yintong turned around. Chu Liyue smiled innocently, but the words he said almost angered her to death. You haven't fulfilled your bet yet. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This Chuyu was too daring. Could he not see how ugly Lu Yintong's expression was now? He was going to offend her to death. Chu Liyue obviously knew that this would make Lu Yintong hate him even more. But when had she ever given him a chance? They were the ones who suggested the competition, and they were the ones who planned the bet. If not for Dumpling's ability and her trump card, the one lying there would be Dumpling now. She had already offended them when she also had a red-tailed phoenix, and her bloodline was richer and more orthodox than the other parties. Since she was wrong no matter what she did, why should she lower herself? Lu Yintong clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. If not for the fact that students were not allowed to fight on Thousand Wine Mountain, she would have gone back and torn that disgusting face apart. She turned around and walked to the red-tailed phoenix on the ground. She raised her wrist and a red force enveloped it. Soon, a drop of red blood condensed on the red-tailed phoenix's head. Then the second and third drops. Lu Yintong flicked her sleeve. Here you go. The 3 blood droplets flew over with a tyrannical force. Chu Liyue raised his eyebrows slightly. He circulated the force in his palm and received the 3 blood droplets safely. Some sharp-eyed people saw this scene, and their expressions changed slightly. The way they looked at Chu Liyue was much more complicated than before. Lu Yintong was a demigod expert. Although she did not use her full strength in this move, the force it contained was not small. Chu Yu, a rank 7 warrior, actually received it easily. Chu Liyue's lips curled up slightly. Senior Sister Lu is a woman of her word. Everyone. Enough. I beg you, please don't seek death again. Chu Liyue did not seem to hear the cries in their hearts. He fed the 3 blood droplets to Dumpling and asked with a smile. Then about the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain. Chapter 1148. Since I promised you, I'll keep my word. Lu Yintong finally couldn't help but shout. Everyone was silent for a moment. Many people looked at Chu Liyue sympathetically. This time, he had completely offended Lu Yintong. In the academy, the consequences of offending this small group were extremely serious. As long as they wanted to, they could make a freshman like Chu Yu, who had no background, struggle in the academy. Even if his master was Elder Wanzheng, he couldn't completely control the undercurrents between the students. This kid is in trouble. However, the youth seemed to be unaware of this. When he heard Lu Yintong's words, he relaxed his brows and pursed his lips into a smile. Junior brother certainly trusts senior sister Lu's character. There was dead silence all around. Everyone could already imagine the miserable days he would have in the academy. Junior brother Chu Yu is indeed worthy of Elder Wan Zheng's attention. You are indeed powerful. The smile on Gong Sheng's face faded a lot, and the corners of his eyes and brows could not hide the coldness. If it was anyone else, they would definitely feel guilty and afraid under his gaze. But Chu Luyue would not. She calmly replied, "Thank you for your praise, senior brother Gong Sheng. Junior brother still has a lot to learn from you." Even Gong Sheng, who was used to being arrogant and unbridled, was speechless at this moment. His chest choked, and his anger burned even more. Then he sneered. Good. Junior brother Chu Yu. Very good." With that, he quickly walked to Lu Yintong's side. "Atong, go back and heal the little thing first. As for the rest, we'll talk about it later." Lu Yintong nodded. After this torment, his relaxed and playful mood had completely dissipated. The few of them turned around and were about to leave. The people below hurriedly made way for them. After taking a few steps, Gong Sheng suddenly turned around and stared coldly at Chu Luyue. He said word by word, "Junior brother Chu Yu, if there's a chance in the future, let's spar again. When the time comes, let us see your ability." After saying that, they didn't stay any longer. Their figures quickly disappeared into the dense forest. The atmosphere on the mountaintop was almost stagnant, and no one spoke for a long time. No one had expected things to turn out this way. "Chu Yu, are you all right?" Luo Shishir stepped forward with a worried expression. Chu Luyue chuckled. "Aren't I fine? What could have happened?" Arrogant. Yin Fan finally couldn't help but mock. "Do you think you're amazing after winning today? Very impressive. Do you know what kind of people you have offended? In the future, you'll have a taste of your own medicine." Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows. "Then how can I not offend them? Let Dumpling admit defeat and offer up the divine beast's blood?" Yin Fan choked. If it was anyone else, it was impossible for them to do such a thing without any ill feelings. This wasn't just plundering the contracted divine beast. It was also a humiliation to its master. Forget it. Since things have already come to this, let nature take its course. Luo Yinming stepped forward and comforted him. They weren't in the right in the first place, so they couldn't really do anything to you. Naive. Yin Fan sneered. Luo Shishir and the others ignored him. At this moment, they could also see Yin Fan's rejection of Chu Yu. Although they had known Yin Fan for a long time, they could already see too many problems from this matter. In comparison, they wanted to stand on Chu Yu's side more. "Chu Yu, don't worry. You won fair and square. Even if it goes to the elders, they will still be in the wrong. If they really want to deal with you, there's still us. If it doesn't work, there's still fourth brother." Luo Yinlin's ranking on the Azure Cloud roll was much higher than theirs. Chu Luyue's heart warmed. "Thank you. However, this is my business after all. I will try my best to handle it myself." She paused for a moment, and there seemed to be a light flickering in her eyes. "I came to the academy to cultivate, to increase my strength, and to become an expert, not to lower my head to anyone. How the other party treats me, I will naturally treat them the same." Since he didn't intend to respect her from the beginning, then there was no need to be polite. "That's right." Zhuo Sheng's face was full of agreement. "They can't compare to you, so how could they have the face to target you? The strong were respected." Luo Shishir and Luo Yinming looked at each other, but there was still a hint of worry between their brows. Chu Luyue smiled and shook her head. "Forget it. Don't let this small matter affect your mood. Dumpling." She tapped Dumpling's head. "There's still some time before the end of the night. Hurry up and go." Roar. When Dumpling heard this, it immediately rushed to the spring eye excitedly and plunged its little head into it. Gulp, gulp. Without asking or looking at its expression, Chu Luyue could feel its joy and excitement. This made her feel much better. The master and servant were happy, but the others present had different thoughts. Some people began to leave. Obviously, they didn't want to be associated with this bold and unbridled new student, nor did they want to have any relationship with him. Soon, there were only a few people left on Thousand Wine Mountain. The place that was originally bustling with noise and excitement quickly became cold and desolate. Yin Fan wanted to persuade Luo Shishir and the others to leave quickly, but he was refuted by a few people and finally left angrily. Time passed little by little. Luo Yinming looked at the spring eye again and asked with a conflicted expression, "Why hasn't it drunk enough? Is it planning to stay here?" It had been quite some time since the end of that competition, but it was still there. It was just short of directly soaking itself in. Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples. Judging from Dumpling's current situation, the power contained in the spring water was really very effective for it. The injury it had just suffered was almost healed. Of course, the effect of the 3 drops of divine beast blood was also indispensable. If it stayed here a little longer, it might really be able to awaken the power of its bloodline quickly. "It's almost time, we have to go." Luo Shishir looked up at the sky and reminded. Chu Luiyue shouted at Dumpling. Dumpling reluctantly left the spring eye and looked back 3 times with every step. When it finally came back to Chu Luiyue, a short period of time had already passed. Seeing the nervousness and urging of the others, Chu Luiyue said, "Let's go. It should be too late to go down the mountain now." Boom! An earth-shattering loud sound suddenly exploded in the sky above Thousand Wine Mountain. Chu Luiyue and the others were shocked and immediately looked up. In the dark blue night sky, the bright moon was already hidden behind a large number of rolling dark clouds, and a silver dragon-like lightning was crazily gathering in it. "Someone is summoning Tianlei to refine equipment," Luo Yinming shouted with a face full of shock. "Let's go. If we are affected, we won't have a good time." As they spoke, the Tianlei suddenly fell and directly hit the people at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. Digression. Yesterday's first chapter was censored because of sensitive words and sentences. It had already been edited and waiting to be restored. In fact, when I was writing, I vaguely felt that I was going to cry. Summary: Yongwen missed a bite of fat meat. Chapter 1149. The dazzling light illuminated half of the sky. "Retreat!" Luo Yinming yelled. She grabbed Luo Shishir and ran down the mountain. Zhuosheng followed closely behind. He had just taken a step when he seemed to have thought of something. He quickly turned back and shouted at Chu Luiyue. "Chuyu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave." Why was he still standing there stupidly at a time like this? Was he waiting to be struck by lightning? Chu Luiyue had just moved when he saw a red figure flash in front of him. Dumpling had suddenly jumped out again. "Dumpling!" Chu Luiyue hurriedly shouted, but Dumpling did not seem to hear him. With a few leaps, it went straight to the mouth of the spring at the top of the mountain. Chu Luiyue frowned. It had just returned from there. Why did it go back now? Could it be that there was something in the mouth of the spring that attracted it? But no matter what it was not as important as his own life. At this moment, Tianlei was approaching. The small red figure looked especially small under the dazzling light of the Tianlei. If it struck, Chu Luiyue gritted his teeth and suddenly ran toward the top of the mountain. "Chuyu, are you crazy?" Zhuosheng's shocked roar came from behind. Running to the top of the mountain at this time, was he not courting death? At this moment, Luo Shishir and Zhuosheng, who had rushed down some distance, heard Zhuosheng's shout and turned back to look. It did not matter if it was unbearable, but when they looked, they widened their eyes in disbelief. In the dark night, the sky was dark. On the lonely and cold mountain peak, the lush forest cast a thick shadow, and in this ink-like darkness that was difficult to disperse, a bolt of heavenly lightning suddenly tore it apart. It destroyed everything in its path. Even if it was just a simple glance, it was enough to send chills down one's spine. Just when everyone wanted to avoid it immediately, there was one person who rushed up without hesitation. "Chuyu!" Luo Shishir shouted out subconsciously, but the sound of wind and thunder shook the sky. Her voice was swallowed by the deafening movement. Luo Shishir gritted her teeth and was about to run back when Luo Yinming pulled her back. "What are you doing?" Luo Yinming's voice was extremely stern. "Do you want to die?" Luo Shishir opened her mouth, but when she saw her brother's gaze, she finally swallowed the rest of her words. Luo Yinming also saw the worry in her eyes. He sighed in his heart and shouted at Zhuosheng, "Don't worry. Zhuosheng, come and take Shishir and leave first." I'll go get Chuyu. Although Luo Shishir and Zhuosheng were martial artists and Luo Yanming was a Xian master, his combat strength was the strongest among the three of them. Zhuosheng quickly understood what he meant and rushed over. However, just as Luo Yanming was about to go up, a clear and powerful voice suddenly came from above. At first, the three of them did not take these words to heart. In their opinion, Chu Luyue had already gone crazy. Otherwise, why would she take such a risk? She was taking her own life as a joke. However, before Luo Yanming could lift his leg, a powerful force suddenly wrapped around him. The force was overbearing, but it was also gentle and tolerant. Affected by this force, the three of them retreated uncontrollably. They looked at each other in shock. Chuyu was really going to let them leave first. He really planned to deal with Tianlei by himself. Luo Yanming frowned. After a moment of silence, he said, "Maybe Chuyu really has other plans," he said in a low voice. "Why don't we leave first and wait for him at the foot of the mountain, so that we won't cause trouble for him if we stay here?" For some reason, he felt that Chuyu could really deal with the situation in front of him alone, even if it sounded extremely ridiculous. Luo Shishir disagreed with a frown. Under the dazzling light of Tianlei, the young man's thin and tall figure looked especially frail. But splash! Zhuosheng wasn't paying attention and stepped into the stream. He has the black jade token on him. Even if he's really in danger, the elders won't just sit by and watch. Luo Yanming said calmly, "This is still the Academy's territory after all." Luo Shishir's expression finally relaxed a little. Finally she nodded. Then, boom! Before he could finish his sentence, a second bolt of lightning had appeared in the sky. What was even more shocking was that this bolt of heavenly lightning was actually heading straight for them. "Let's go." Luo Yanming realized that something was wrong and made a prompt decision to retreat with the others. Zhuosheng also quickly pulled himself out of the stream. Half of his legs were soaked. However, even though they were fast, Tianlei was faster. In the blink of an eye, the heavenly lightning had already caught up to the top of their heads. The powerful pressure easily shrouded them. At this moment, Chu Luyue had already followed Dumpling to the mouth of the spring. Dumpling wee. Chu Luyue had just opened his mouth when he was stunned by the scene in front of him. In the inch-sized mouth of the spring, the transparent spring water gradually stopped gushing out, leaving only a small piece of clear and cool water. The shadow of the Tianlei above them was clearly reflected in the water. The water was sparkling and bright. For a moment, this scene gave Chu Luyue the illusion that the Tianlei was actually swimming in the spring. Beside it, there seemed to be a stream of light pouring down, following the flow of the stream. This strange and ghostly scene was so shocking that even Chu Luyue was stunned on the spot. Dumpling was squatting beside the mouth of the spring, looking at it eagerly. It seemed like she was waiting for something, or like she wanted to dive in and take out the treasure hidden below. Chu Luyue suddenly remembered the legendary three-eyed eagle's words. It said that this spring could help Dumpling completely awaken the power of her bloodline. Could it be that there was really a secret below? Chu Luyue hesitated for a moment, and a layer of faint golden light enveloped her body. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, she felt slightly more at ease and reached out towards the mouth of the spring. Crack! All of a sudden, a strange sound was heard. Chu Luyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. That bolt of heavenly lightning suddenly struck down at her, at an even faster speed. At the same time, the wind whistled in her ears. The second Tianlei that had enveloped Luo Shishir and the others suddenly changed direction and headed straight for Chu Luyue. Chi-chi. The sound of air being torn apart was sharp. Luo Shishir and the others looked up, and in the next second, their eyes were filled with shock. At the top of the mountain, the two bolts of heavenly lightning struck the thin and tall youth at the same time. Boom! In an instant, the light was so bright that it almost stung everyone's eyes, and the youth's figure completely disappeared in the dazzling light. Chapter 1150. Chuyu. The few of them exclaimed, and their hearts almost jumped out of their throats. At this moment, a tyrannical wave spread rapidly from the top of the mountain. Luo Yanming knew that something was wrong, and immediately retreated with the two of them. The few of them only felt a terrifying and vast force attacking them, and their bodies were instantly sent flying. The world was spinning. In just a moment, they fell to the ground together. Bang! A dull sound was heard. Luo Shishir endured the pain on her back, and forced herself to look up, only to find that she had been sent out of the Thousand Wine Mountain. Luo Yanming and Zhuosheng were the same, and they fell beside her. Looking up from here, the Thousand Wine Mountain was still quiet, and the wind rustled the leaves as if nothing had happened. Luo Shishir's heart seemed to be clenched by something. Shishir, how are you? Luo Yanming got up with difficulty, ignoring the pain on his body, and took the lead to ask worriedly. Luo Shishir shook her head. Fifth brother, don't worry. I'm fine. But Luo Yanming noticed that her expression was not right, so he followed her gaze. When he saw the pitch-black and extremely silent Myriad Wine Mountain, he was shocked as well, and his pupils instantly constricted. How could this be? Although this was the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain, it was definitely not to the extent that they could not see the situation on the mountain. Moreover, the commotion just now was so shocking. Logically speaking, no matter how far away they were, they should have noticed it. But now, the Thousand Wine Mountain seemed to be quiet. It seems that there's a special barrier on the Thousand Wine Mountain. Zhuosheng bared his teeth and stood up. Otherwise, it definitely wouldn't be like what we're seeing now. This also explains why there was such a commotion on the Thousand Wine Mountain. But no one came. Zhuosheng's words enlightened Luo Shishir and Zhuosheng. No wonder. A light flashed across Luo Yanming's mind. The opening time of the Thousand Wine Mountain every day is specially set. I didn't think about it before, but now that I think about it, isn't this very strange? Perhaps some elders' weapon refinement often attracted Tianlei, so they set such a rule. Also, in order not to arouse everyone's suspicion and worry, they specially prepared a barrier to hide everything. If you don't stay on the Thousand Wine Mountain, no one will know what happened there. Luo Shishir continued his words thoughtfully. The three of them fell into a brief silence. This matter was actually very easy to understand. Just a moment ago, they were still on the mountain, and could clearly see the two Tianlei bolts descending. Now, as soon as they were forced out, everything disappeared before their eyes. But Chuyu is still inside. Zhuosheng scratched his head. Luo Shishir and Luo Yanming looked at each other, and saw the worry in each other's eyes. The power of those two Tianlei bolts was truly astonishing. Even they didn't dare to face it head-on. Not to mention Chuyu, who was only at the early stage of the Seventh Order. The Thousand Wine Mountain is the border between the Celestial Physicians area and the Weapon Refiners area. There should be elders there, Luo Yanming said slowly. We shouldn't be able to get in now. Luo Shishir hesitated for a moment. I'll go look for Master. Her master was naturally elder when she. Now. Luo Yanming looked up. It was almost dawn. It didn't seem appropriate to look for the elder at this time. As if reading his thoughts, Luo Shishir shook her head. This matter must be resolved as soon as possible. The longer he stays inside, the more dangerous it will be. That Tianlei was no joke. Luo Yanming hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. Okay. Then I'll wait here. You guys go and look for Elder when she. At the same time, Chu Luyue, who was on the top of the mountain, was in a stalemate with the two Tianlei bolts above her. Yes, a stalemate. When she sensed that the two Tianlei bolts were attacking her, Chu Luyue withdrew her hand from the spring water, shook off the water stains and stood up. But when they arrived in front of her, the two Tianlei bolts stopped at the same time. They were only a few steps away from her. Chu Luyue looked up. Standing close to it, one could clearly see the two streaks of heavenly lightning flowing with brilliant colors. The pressure on them was even more shocking. But they didn't move. They hovered in the air and seemed to be hesitating. If someone could see this scene at this moment, they would definitely feel that it was extremely absurd. Whoosh! Chu Luyue's palm flashed with black light, and the Dragon Abyss sword was already held tightly by her. The simple and heavy sword reflected a cold light. It was a dignified and boiling battle intent. Buzz! Abundant force poured in, and the Dragon Abyss sword hummed. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes, and the corners of her mouth slowly curled up into a presumptuous smile. Which of you two will go first? Master, are you inside? Master. Elder when she was resting when he suddenly heard a hurried knock on the door. Recognizing that this anxious voice came from his newly accepted disciple, Luo Shirshir, Elder when she's heart skipped a beat. With a thought, the door was opened. Luo Shirshir and Zhuosheng were standing at the door looking nervous. What's wrong? What happened? Elder when she frowned and asked. Suddenly coming at this time, it was definitely not a small matter. Luo Shirshir said anxiously. Master, quickly go to Thousand Wine Mountain to take a look. Chuyu is trapped at the top of the mountain. What? The remaining half of drowsiness completely disappeared. And Elder when she suddenly opened his eyes and jumped down from the bed. You said Chuyu is trapped at Thousand Wine Mountain? Yes. And when we came down, there were two Tianlei. Elder when she's expression tensed up, and he immediately walked out. Master will go now. Luo Shirshir and Zhuosheng both heaved a sigh of relief. If they could catch up quickly, Chuyu might be safer. You two stay here. Elder when she suddenly turned around and said with a serious expression. But, also, don't mention what happened tonight to anyone. Elder Wensi had always been smiling and amiable before. This was the first time the two of them had seen him with such a serious expression. Their hearts couldn't help but jump, and they nodded subconsciously. Master, don't worry, we will definitely keep our mouths shut. Elder when she stared at the two of them, and only then did he let out a sigh of relief. All right, don't worry too much. I'll go take a look first. Master, please help me bring Chuyu back safely. Luo Shirshir couldn't help but say. Elder when she blew his beard and glared. Even if you don't say it, I will still catch that kid. Being trapped at Thousand Wine Mountain at this time. He definitely didn't come down in time. The two of them kept quiet guiltily. Actually, it wasn't that late. It was just a little late. Who knew that things would turn out like this? Watch how I teach this kid a lesson later. Elder when she was furious. This was only the first day he officially became a student of the academy, and he had already caused such a big trouble. At first he thought that the kid was very obedient. But who knew? Hey Wenxi? What are you doing here? Mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1151. Hearing the sound, the three of them turned their heads to look. Under the moonlight, they saw a familiar figure walking over unsteadily. It was Elder Huafeng. Seeing the wine pot in his hand, Elder Wensi's face was immediately filled with disdain. How much did you drink? Elder Huafeng chuckled. Not much, not much. I just took a few sips. Why are there two other students here? He took a closer look and recognized Luo Shirshir and Zhuosheng. The way he looked at Elder Wensi was even stranger. You're still bringing the children to train at this time? This is too much. Even if he wanted to give his students special treatment, there was no need to be so active, right? Today was the first day they officially acknowledged their master, right? Elder Wensi looked at him, as if he was looking at a fool. Do you think I'm such a person? Use your brain to think clearly. Luo Shirshir and Zhuosheng. Elder Huafeng actually thought about it seriously and shook his head. TSK, then what are you doing? Elder Wensi couldn't be bothered to waste time with him, and hurried forward. There's an accident on Thousand Wine Mountain. What? These words instantly woke Elder Huafeng up. What happened? Oh, tell me about it, quick. I'm still counting on the spring. That kid Chuyu is trapped in Thousand Wine Mountain. Elder Wensi said concisely. Oh, this what? Elder Huafeng's eyes widened. You mean Chuyu? Although there were many students in the academy, they might not know all of them. However, Chuyu was personally recruited by them. Moreover, Chuyu performed well in the assessment at the beginning of the month, and had just acknowledged Wan Zheng as his master. It was difficult for them to forget him even if they wanted to. Elder Huafeng didn't care about drinking anymore, and hurriedly followed him. I'll go with you. Elder Wensi glanced at him. Elder Huafeng coughed hard. I'm just worried about the safety of the children. Elder Wensi sneered. This old thing was just doing it for the spring water. However, he didn't expose him. At this time, it was always good to have more people. Furthermore, compared to the other elders of the Master Teacher Academy, finding out about this matter, it would be much safer for him to call Radiant Peak over. He turned around and looked at Luo Shirshir and Luo Shirshir. Stay here. Wait for Master to return. The two of them had no choice but to agree. They watched as the two elders left. A moment later, when they had completely disappeared from sight, Zhuosheng could not help but mutter, Shirshir, don't you think that the elders seem to be very secretive about Thousand Wine Mountain? Luo Shirshir nodded. From the looks of it, there was clearly some secret hidden on Thousand Wine Mountain. Her intuition told her that it was better for them not to know too much. With the help of the two elders, he should be fine. Luo Shirshir exhaled softly, but her heart still felt like it was being weighed down by a heavy stone. Zhuosheng thought about it and comforted her. Don't worry, at the very least. He still has a crimson-tailed red phoenix by his side. There won't be any problems. Luo Shirshir could only nod. I hope so. On Thousand Wine Mountain, as soon as Chu Luo finished speaking, the surroundings seemed to become even quieter. The two Tianlei seemed to have stopped above her head motionless. Chu Luo raised her eyebrows and pointed at the first one. Since you came down first, then you first? Tianlei, who was pointed at, suddenly took a step back. Chu Luo raised her eyebrows and pointed the tip of her sword at the other one. You, Qi. This one retreated even further. Dumpling glanced at him disdainfully. Bah, useless. Chu Luo shook her wrist. Are you coming down or not? Her voice was clear and carried a hint of nonchalance. TSK. To think that she thought that the Tianlei she encountered this time would be different from the previous ones. Who knew that it would be the same in front of her? Chu Luo felt a headache coming on. Logically speaking, she was not sharpening her sword this time, nor was she forging any yuan tools. Why did these Tianlei have such a reaction? Boom! At this moment, the third Tianlei descended. Chu Luo looked up, a little impatient. There's more? Then we'll talk about it when all of you are here. When Elder Wenxi and Elder Huafeng arrived at Thousand Wine Mountain, the first thing they saw was Luo Yanming standing at the foot of the mountain. Master? Luo Yanming was also shocked when she saw Elder Huafeng. Why is my master here too? Elder Huafeng widened his eyes. On the way here, he was still complaining to Elder Wenxi that his new disciple was too active. In the blink of an eye, he saw that his new disciple was also here. Elder Wenxi glanced at him disdainfully. Who's stronger? Elder Huafeng coughed and wiped the sweat off his forehead. It's fine. At least our disciples are only outside. The most important thing is the one inside. That's true. Elder Wenxi nodded in agreement. I wonder what Wan Zheng's expression will be when he finds out about this. Anyway, there's someone here to be the scapegoat. Yanming, you go back first. Leave this to us. Elder Huafeng urged her to leave. At this time, if she's still here, isn't she looking for trouble? Then Shirshir and Zhuosheng. Luo Yanming looked behind the two. There was no one. The two of them didn't come. Elder Wenxi also added, you should go back as soon as possible. In addition, don't tell anyone about what happened here today. Hearing the seriousness in the two elders' words, Luo Yanming thought for a moment and immediately agreed. Yes. After Luo Yanming left, the two of them looked at each other. Let's go up and take a look. As Elder Wenxi spoke, his figure flashed and went straight to the top of the mountain. Elder Huafeng followed closely behind. After flying into the air, Elder Wenxi waved his sleeve and threw out the green jade token. Buzz! The void shook. Ripples spread out like water. This scene is so familiar. Elder Huafeng suddenly muttered in a low voice and nudged Elder Wenxi with his elbow. Hey Wenxi, don't you think this thing happened in a dream? Elder Wenxi looked at him speechlessly. Is this old thing really drunk? He reminded him kindly, it's not a dream, it's real. Have you forgotten that a few years ago, when you were drinking on Thousand Wine Mountain, you were caught red-handed by that scourge? Elder Huafeng's eyes slowly widened, and the scenes that he had almost forgotten flashed through his mind. A trace of panic flashed in his eyes. Damn! Shut up. As he spoke, he quickly looked around, subconsciously grabbed the wine pot at his waist, and stuffed it back into his green jade token. He looked as if he had a guilty conscience. Elder Wincy said bitterly, "Look at how useless you are. Could it be that that scourge can jump out now and snatch your wine?" Elder Huafeng was about to argue when the barrier in front of him suddenly opened. Boom! A bolt of heavenly thunder crackled as it charged towards the two of them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1153. Before she finished speaking, a figure suddenly stepped through the air and came over. Chu Luihua looked up and saw the person's robes fluttering. With a few strides, he had crossed quite a distance. She did not even see the other party's movements clearly, and he was already in front of her. Her heart skipped a beat. This person's strength was probably stronger than Elder Wency and the rest. Again, that person stood in the air and waved his arms. Dark clouds surged in the sky. 3 more Tianlei appeared at the same time. These, in addition to the previous ones, were a total of 9 Tianlei. Chu Luihua's eyes stared intently. Weapon Refinement Master. This was actually her first time officially seeing a Weapon Refinement Master. Previously, when she had sharpened the sword herself, she had relied on Taizu's help to succeed. Chu Luihua's heart seemed to be stirring. Weapon Refinement Masters, to her in the past, were merely legendary existences. Distant, mysterious, as if they could never be touched. Even though she had once forged the Cloud Sky Copper sword with Taizu's help, strictly speaking, that was not considered weapon refinement in the true sense. After all, the Cloud Sky Copper sword already had a sword shape, and an embryo at that time. What she had to do was to borrow the Tianlei that Taizu had attracted to sharpen it. And at this moment, she finally knew what weapon refinement was. That person stood in the air and waved his hands. The Tianlei seemed to be under his control and flew down. Plop! One by one, the Tianlei fell into the mouth of the spring. The shocking pressure and aura almost pressed Chu Luihua until she could not breathe. She should have retreated to avoid being accidentally injured. But her feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, and she could not move. Silver light flashed in the mouth of the spring. Even though she was already some distance away, Chu Luihua could still see the scene inside clearly. Countless tyrannical forces intertwined. Right at this moment, that person in the sky suddenly raised his hand. Chi! A green glow flew up from the mouth of the spring. It fell into that person's hands. Chu Luihua looked up and saw that it was a short sword. The short sword was green in color, as clear as jade, and emitted a faint luster. The sword was thin and narrow, but extremely sharp. The pressure was astonishing. Whoosh! That person held the sword and lightly drew a line in the air. A huge black spatial crack suddenly appeared. Vaguely, there was the sound of a tiger's roar. This was enough to show the power of this forged sword. Chu Luihua was shocked. This was her first time seeing a true weapon refiner forge a divine artifact. Even though she couldn't see everything, what she saw so far was enough to shock her. Seized Tianlei's power to forge the world's divine weapons. In an instant, it was as if the entire world was under his control. Although the expression on his face did not change much, Chu Luihua's heart was uncontrollably stirring up huge waves. Her black jade-like eyes were bright and resplendent. 9 Tianlei. Then, that person must have forged a top-notch high-grade divine artifact. And this person was at least a high-level armament master. That's right. That's right. You didn't waste this month of my efforts. That person was obviously very happy as well. He held the short sword in his hand and said happily. But at this time, the expressions of Elder Wincy and Elder Ouyang were not so good. Elder Huafeng was the first to lose control and shouted, "Ouyang, come down." Only then did Elder Ouyang come back to his senses and look down. "Huafeng, Wency, why are the two of you here?" As he spoke, he turned his gaze and saw Chu Luihua standing next to him. His eyes, which were almost invisible from his smile, suddenly widened, and his face was filled with shock. "Why is there a child here?" The two elders, Chu Luihua, who had been ignored. Although her current appearance and figure were not so eye-catching, it was not so easy for others to not see her. "Hey, what's wrong with the two of you?" Elder Ouyang raised his head and looked at the sky. The dark night was almost fading away. The horizon was dark blue, and the place where the sky met the earth was suffused with a fishbelly white. The light gradually penetrated through the layers of clouds. "It's going to be dawn soon. Why are you still here with the child?" "Bah." Elder Huafeng couldn't help but spit. "Ouyang, open your eyes wide and take a look. We didn't bring this kid in. When you summoned Tianlei to refine the sword just now, he was already here. You're blind and you can't see him, and you're blaming us? What? He was here just now." Elder Ouyang was at a loss. Only then did he carefully size up Chu Luyue, and his expression became more and more strange. "Is this a new student? Doesn't he know the rules?" The corner of Chu Luyue's eyes twitched. She suddenly felt that ever since she entered Lingxiao College, she had been fighting with the word rules. The key was that she didn't deliberately violate the rules, but for some reason, she would encounter all kinds of situations every time. It was to the point where she couldn't explain it at all. "It's all your fault." Before Chu Luyue could explain, Elder Wensi took the lead and sneered. "Before refining, don't you know to see if there are any other students here?" According to what Luo Shishir and the others said just now, they should have left at the right time. But before they could leave, Tianlei came. Thus, Chuyu was trapped. In the end, it became like this. Elder Ouyang blinked his eyes innocently. How could I have thought that there would be people here? He was in a hurry today, but he wasn't too early. After all, this place had always been fine before. Chapter 1154. Chu Liyue's expression was innocent. She blinked her eyes lightly, and a trace of confusion appeared in her clear eyes. This student doesn't know either. Elder Ouyang looked at her suspiciously. After this old man summoned Tianlei, it should have landed directly in this spring. Unless it felt that there was another threat, it would have changed its path halfway. Just now, this Tianlei seemed to have been entangled with you for so long. He sized up Chu Luyue from head to toe and muttered in a low voice. He doesn't look old. He shouldn't be able to deal with Tianlei. Ouyang, what are you thinking? Elder Huafeng laughed out loud. This brat Chuyu is only at the early stage of the 7th stage. How could he be a match for Tianlei? If Wensi and I didn't come in time. Elder Wensi, who was beside him, didn't say anything in agreement. Instead, he looked at Chu Luyue with a deep gaze. He'd stepped into the barrier before Elder Huafeng, so he was able to see the situation much clearer than Elder Huafeng. At that time, after the two of them entered, Chuyu was standing at the top of the mountain. However, at that time, he didn't seem to be besieged by Tianlei. Instead, it seemed like he was confronting Tianlei. Yes, it was a confrontation. Elder Wensi had seen many storms and waves. He knew that under normal circumstances, this kind of situation would only happen when a cultivator was extremely strong. However, this was definitely not something that Chuyu could do. He still remembered that when the youth turned around, although his face was filled with surprise, his jade-like eyes were unexpectedly calm. No matter how he thought about it, it was wrong. Chu Luyue lowered her eyes and pretended not to know. Elder Ouyang asked for a while, but seeing that he couldn't get anything out of him, he simply gave up. I'm probably wrong. Let's not talk about this for now. What do you plan to do in this situation? Elder Ouyang's gaze swept back and forth between the two elders, and there was a meaningful look in his eyes. This 1,000-wine mountain was usually strictly limited to the time to enter. Students were absolutely not allowed to appear here at such a time. But now, not only was Chuyu here, he had seen too much. Even if he didn't know the secret of the spring, he had already seen something he shouldn't have. If it was an outsider who had barged in on purpose, they could just kill him directly. But in the end, Chuyu was a student of his own academy. He couldn't do that. Therefore, this matter became very troublesome. Elder Wensi was silent for a moment and looked at Chu Luyue. Chuyu, are you able to keep your mouth shut about today's matter and not reveal anything to the outside world? Could Chu Luyue say no? She nodded and said seriously, Today, I've been cultivating in my residence. I don't know anything else. Elder Wensi stared at him. That spring eye. You. Before he could finish his sentence, the face of the young man in front of him was still a little immature. Her eyes were clean, pure and clear. It was as if one could see the bottom, with a single glance. He heaved a sigh of relief. Forget it. Let's just pretend that nothing happened today. Whoosh. Before he could finish his words, a strange sound suddenly came from the spring eye on the top of the mountain. Chu Luyue instinctively turned around to take a look, and saw that the spring was glowing brightly. Vaguely, she could see that several Tianlei inside were swimming faster. They were intertwining crazily. It was as if they would break out of it in the next moment. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. Standing here, she could clearly feel that the pressure in that place was rising at an astonishing speed. At this moment, Dumpling suddenly flew out from her shoulder. She went straight there. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling! The three elders were also shocked. Stop it! Elder when she roared. But it was too late. Chu Luyue and Dumpling's position was very close to the spring eye. It made a move at such a surprising time. Who could stop it? Plop! Tuanzi plunged directly into the mouth of the spring. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. Its small red figure was instantly enveloped by countless silver lights. Crackle! Chu Luyue could even clearly hear the sound of the Tianlei swimming crazily on Dumpling's body. She was about to move when she suddenly felt a subtle fluctuation in her body. That was Dumpling's aura increasing. Chu Luyue was really shocked. This was the reason why Dumpling couldn't fly out. This was only the beginning. Its bloodline potential seemed to be showing signs of being stimulated. If it stayed in it for a little longer. Quick! Get it out! Elder Ouyang shouted with trembling hands. My wine! Elder Huafeng screamed, and was the first to pounce over. This little thing actually went in directly. He ran directly to the spring eye and grabbed Dumpling with his big hand. Tuanzi blinked its round eyes, and dived into the deeper part of the cave. Elder Huafeng was really anxious and couldn't help but curse. Come out for me. It wasn't easy for Dumpling to find this opportunity to come in. At this moment it was enjoying it the most, so how could it come out? Elder Huafeng gritted his teeth in anger, and subconsciously wanted to make a move. But when his hand was about to sink into the water, he suddenly stopped, and a trace of struggle flashed across his face. It wasn't easy for them to raise it for so many years. Chuyu, get it out immediately. Elder Wensi spoke up. Seeing his obviously serious expression, Chu Luyue curled her hands in her sleeves and looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, if you don't come back, never come back. She said these words very calmly, but there was a clear warning in her voice. Dumpling's body stiffened, and then it quickly swam back and forth in the spring eye before reluctantly flying up. Its entire body was soaked, and its red feathers were soaked in water, making the color even richer. On it, one could even see a few silver lights flashing quickly and disappearing under its feathers. When the elders saw this scene, their expressions became extremely interesting. That was the Tianlei that they had stored with great difficulty in the spring eye. After so many years, they had finally saved up this little bit. But in the end, it was all used up by this thing. Elder Wensi took a deep breath, and his vision turned black. Dumpling squatted on Chu Luyue's shoulder, and rubbed its head with its wings with an innocent expression. Elder Wensi suddenly couldn't say the rest of his words. The red-tailed phoenix was a divine beast, and its intelligence was not inferior to that of the human race. The reason why it did this was because it did it on purpose. It still dared to do this in front of them. With such a temperament and courage, it was useless to scold it 100 times. Elder Wensi turned his gaze and looked at Chu Luyue, suppressing the anger in his heart. Chuyu, now what do you think we should do? Chu Luyue pondered for a moment, then suddenly picked up Dumpling and handed it over. Elder, whoever causes trouble will be responsible, okay? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.